a man addresses Kuro-sama. While sipping tea, he informs Kuro that as of today, he is a married man. Kuro is stunned, having just been informed by his secretary, Gray, about a marriage he knows nothing about. A group of colorful anime characters is shown. The narrator introduces himself as Kuro Hartfield, a 19-year-old noble who has been governing this remote territory for 4 years. He clarifies that he is not a competent lord but rather a noble in name only, having been effectively exiled to this land for the purpose of isolation. Kuro reveals that he possesses memories of a previous life as a 25-year-old clothing pattern maker who passed away. He explains that he has been reincarnated into the world of an otome game his sister used to play, a story set in a kingdom's academy where the heroine uses alchemy to solve problems while romancing various male characters. Despite being in this world, he is older than the main characters and had no involvement with them during his time at the academy, nor did he wish to. He prefers his peaceful life in the countryside, but Gray chides him for his escapism and insists on continuing the discussion about his sudden marriage. Gray cheerfully congratulates him, noting how fortunate it is that someone proposed, given that other noble ladies consider Kuro to be bad debt. Kuro is shocked by the nickname pervert, which is news to him, while Gray teases him about being a lucky man. Gray presents official documents from the church and the bride's parents, informing a shocked Kuro that, legally speaking, they are already husband and wife. Kuro feels a strange sense of familiarity with the bride's family name, while Gray begins to panic, misinterpreting his master's silence as a sign that he might be a lolicon. Setting aside his master's preferences, Gray moves on to the topic of the bride herself. The document reveals the name Violet Valentine, which Kuro recognizes as a name of great significance within this world. Gray confirms that the bride, Violet Valentine, is the daughter of a ducal house. Kuro's mind races as he processes the name Violet Valentine. He remembers her from the game Cassus as the beautiful and proud villainess, a rival character who antagonized the protagonist on nearly every route. In the game, her story often ended in tragedy, with one of the most common outcomes being her death at the hands of a captured target she had angered by harming the heroine. He recalls her other unfortunate fates, being sacrificed to a rampaging monster, being exiled to a distant convent after losing a duel, or being married off to an ugly man in the countryside. Kuro muses that the game's creators must have had a personal grudge against the character to treat her so cruelly. He then has a horrifying realization. He is the ugly man from the countryside, from her fourth bad ending route. He imagines his sister from his previous life would have been ecstatic to learn that her romantically inept older brother was finally getting married. He surmises that Violet must have challenged the game's protagonist to a duel out of jealousy, lost, and is now being forced into this marriage as a consequence. He remembers her in-game persona as an arrogant, passionate, and overbearing noblewoman who frequently berated the protagonist and flaunted her connection to the crown prince. The thought of living with such a difficult person fills him with a profound lack of confidence. He idly wonders if his new wife might prefer pretty boys like Gray, which prompts a flustered denial from his secretary. Kuro clarifies that he only meant it would be convenient if her tastes ran that way, but Gray insists that he should hope she comes to like him instead. Kuro dismisses the idea as impossible, knowing that Violet was supposed to be in love with the game's handsome third prince, Vermilion Randolph. A few days later, Gray chides the still depressed Kuro and proudly announces that all preparations to welcome his new wife are perfect. Kuro retorts that Gray's idea of perfect preparations involved spending all his time meticulously pruning the garden, leaving only enough time to prepare tea. Their banter is interrupted by a woman's voice announcing her arrival at the front gate. A young woman with long hair stands at the entrance, explaining that she took the liberty of calling out since the gate was open. Kuro is captivated by her clear voice, her beautiful violet hair, and her striking blue eyes as she formally introduces herself as Violet Valentine. He immediately recognizes her from the game, but he is struck by the absence of her trademark aggressive glare. Instead, her eyes are filled with a deep, sorrowful gloom. This sad and beautiful woman standing before him is now his wife. Later, over tea, she apologizes for being unable to offer him anything more substantial. Kuro, who had mentally prepared himself for a tirade about the lack of a proper welcome, is taken aback by her polite and calm demeanor as she compliments the tea, finding it soothing after her long journey. He watches her sip her tea and begins to wonder if she might be a much kinder person than he had anticipated. He observes that her every movement and gesture is the very picture of elegance. Her refined posture, her tall and mature appearance for her age, and her graceful actions all point to an excellent upbringing. He recalls that, in addition to her noble bearing, she was also a top-tier student with swordsmanship skills that could match any man's. He is astounded by just how incredibly talented she is. Yet, despite all her abilities, she was relegated to the role of a mere stepping stone for the game's protagonist, ultimately fated to lose against her in a duel. He finds himself staring at her, wondering if her hair in the game had always been so straight, and he apologizes for his rudeness when she notices his gaze. He formally introduces himself as Kuro Heartfield, the fourth-year lord of the territory of Shiki, and welcomes her despite the sudden nature of their marriage. She quietly acknowledges his introduction and accepts his welcome. She then reintroduces herself as Violet Valentine, the eldest daughter of the ducal house Valentine. In her introduction, she almost refers to Kuro as Your Highness before catching herself, a slip of the tongue that he notices. She quickly corrects herself, stating that she should now be called Violet Heartfield, as she can no longer use the name of a ducal house. Kuro kindly tells her that he will not ask about the circumstances of their marriage and that she can tell him when she feels ready, a gesture of kindness that seems to touch her. He privately concludes that his theory was correct. She must have lost a duel, had her engagement to the prince broken, and been subsequently abandoned by her parents. She is now in a position where she must accept a marriage to a man she has only just met, a fate she may consider better than being forced to take her own life. He reflects on how cruel this situation must be for a girl of only 15 and quietly calls for Gray. He offers to have Gray prepare a bath for her so she can rest after her journey, an offer she accepts with a quiet thank you. When he asks what she will do in the meantime, she looks down, a single tear escaping her eye. A single tear rolls down her cheek. He tells Violet that he has had Gray prepare a separate room for her. A short while later, Violet appears at the door to his study. He is surprised to see her and gives her permission to enter. She stands in the doorway, asking if he needed something from her. He is internally flustered by her beauty and strong presence, before asking if she has some business with him. He is flustered by her appearance. She simply says his name, Kurodano. She states that although they have only just met under sudden circumstances, they are now husband and wife and this is their first time spending the night together in the same residence. She concludes that this means tonight is, effectively, their wedding night. Kuro's mind drifts to a common trope he remembers from Otome games. The heroines are often designed with modest figures. In contrast, the rival characters are typically more endowed, a deliberate design choice. He speculates, to make the heroine's inner charms, rather than her physical appeal, the focus of the story. He momentarily wonders why his thoughts have turned to analyzing game design at a time like this. The reason is immediately clear. It is a desperate attempt to escape the overwhelming reality of his current situation. Standing before him in his room is his new wife, Violet, clad only in her undergarments, leaving him utterly flustered. A quick summary flashes through his mind. His wife had suddenly appeared, declaring that it was their wedding night and she had come to be with him. She grips him firmly, her intentions clear. He can't help but notice how beautiful she is, even as he internally admits a personal preference for a smaller build. Shaking himself from his daze, he pushes her back gently, urging her to calm down. He suggests they should talk, but only after she gets dressed. Violet counters that as a married couple, consummating their marriage is a perfectly natural act. She challenges him directly, asking if he intends for her to be the only one in such a state of undress. Her words strike a chord, and he reminds himself that she is right. They are husband and wife. He finds himself unable to argue that looking at her is wrong. As she moves closer, she whispers that although she is embarrassed, he is welcome to touch her, a scene he imagines Gray would find amusing. She urges him to proceed without delay. Before he can react, she pushes him back onto the bed. She positions herself over him, ready to move forward. As she leans in, however, he feels her trembling and realizes with certainty that this is not what she truly wants. With a look of profound sadness, she asks if he also finds her unappealing. The word "also" hangs in the air, revealing a deeper history of rejection. Violet's thoughts turn to the game's heroine, believing that men must prefer a woman like her, small, sweet, earnest, and in need of protection. The heroine was a commoner who smiled at everyone, possessing qualities Violet envied and which fueled her jealousy. She understands now that her arranged marriage is the direct consequence of losing to that girl in one of the game's scenarios. The man she loved now adored the heroine and hated her, but despite the heartbreak, Violet asserts her understanding of her duty as a noble on her wedding night. She steels herself and declares that she is prepared for what must happen. Kuro perceives her seriousness, realizing she is acting not from desire but from a rigid adherence to her noble upbringing and the duties of a wife. He sees a person driven by duty above all else, and he refuses to take advantage of someone simply going through the motions. Looking her directly in the eye, he tells her that he dislikes the woman she is pretending to be. The word dislike strikes her like a physical blow. It triggers the painful memory of the prince she loved, shouting at her to never appear before him and the heroine again. The last words she ever heard from him were a cold, absolute rejection. All her life, she had striven to be a woman worthy of a prince, only to be cast aside for her efforts, a fate that felt profoundly unfair. The cruelty continued with her own father, who told her that even killing someone as worthless as her would be a crime. The day after her engagement ended, her father's words weren't just a rejection, they were a complete dismissal of her existence. While the initial plan was to send her to a convent, it was decided she could be of some use by being married off to a countryside noble, Kuro Hartfield. During her journey to his remote territory, she heard many rumors about the man she was to marry. He was said to be a violent, arrogant, jealous, and lecherous dropout from the academy, now ruling as a frontier lord. Although none of the rumors were good, she resigned herself to the belief that such a man was a fitting match for her in her disgraced state. Arriving at her new home alone, without an entourage, she had called out at the gate. She was surprised to find that both Kuro and his secretary, Gray, seemed to be genuinely good people, contrary to everything she'd heard. The lord himself was cleaning the estate, apologizing for his dirty appearance when she arrived unexpectedly. She soon learned that Kuro and Gray were the only two residents of the vast mansion, unable to afford any other staff. The thought of a grown man and a young boy living alone in such a large house struck her as potentially improper. But she quickly decided she was in no position to pass judgment on anyone else's life. After all, her own attempts to do what she thought was right for the prince had only been seen as a nuisance. She admitted to herself that she was afraid of having lost her status and her future, yet unable to let go of her feelings for the prince. Kuro's gentle words, telling her he wouldn't pry and she could speak when ready, echoed in her mind. In that moment, she knew the rumors about him were wrong. Still, she remained wary, recalling warnings that all men were beasts, especially when he invited her to take a bath. Her mind immediately leaped to the conclusion that this was a prelude to him claiming his husbandly rights. Since her new husband was rumored to be a pervert, she thought it was possible he would try something while she bathed. Despite her fears, she accepted his offer. She decided she would confront any untoward behavior with the dignity of a noblewoman. She recalled her handmaiden's advice that a wife must accept her husband's advances and that the man should be the one to initiate. Remembering the provocative lingerie her handmaiden gave her as a gift, she decided now was the time to use it. Her mind was made up. She was resolved to see this through. Yet, after her bath, he did not come to her room, making her wonder if he was waiting for her to make the first move. Recalling a classmate's advice that a woman should sometimes be proactive, she decided to go to his room herself. This bold action led directly to his rejection, leaving her to wonder if she had failed once again. But instead of pushing her away, Kuro apologized and gently cupped her face in his hands. Utterly confused by his actions, she could only stare back at him with wide, questioning eyes. Kuro gently holds Violet's face in his hands, his expression soft. She looks at him, startled and blushing, and quietly speaks his name. He then playfully squishes her cheeks together. With a serious tone, he tells her to stop avoiding his gaze and look at him properly. Confused, she does as he asks, her eyes finally focusing on his as she notices something peculiar. She sees for the first time that his eyes are a beautiful and mysterious shade of green. It dawns on her that despite talking all day, she had never truly looked at him until now, just as he begins to speak of her foolish actions at the academy. He recounts how she used to intimidate any woman who dared approach Prince Vermilion. She ignored the prince's own feelings, he continues, and lashed out at any girl she perceived as a rival. This behavior escalated until she challenged the game's heroine to a duel at a ball, where she was soundly defeated, a detailed account that leaves Violet wondering how he could possibly know. He points out that she was surrounded by followers but had no true friends to guide her, even recalling that she had warned at least one person not to be overly familiar. A wave of disbelief washes over her as she questions how he could be aware of such personal details of her past. He recites her reputation back to her, an arrogant duchess who used the prince's authority to enforce social hierarchy. He even knows her unflattering nickname, the amethyst paper airplane, earned from her tendency to crash and burn spectacularly, a name she herself had never heard. Enraged and embarrassed, she demands to know what gives him the right to speak of her past with such familiarity. He silences her protest by squishing her face again, insisting that she listen to what he has to say. He tells her that dedicating yourself to another person is an act of self-sacrifice. To be rejected by the very person for whom you sacrificed so much is an even more profound pain. He urges her not to invalidate the genuine effort she put forth for someone she loved. Violet reflects on her past, realizing all she ever wanted was for someone to acknowledge that her actions, performed with the pride of a duke's daughter, were not entirely wrong. Kuro continues, telling her the woman he knows is a diligent, dignified, and beautiful person who should be far more proud of herself. He pleads with her not to hate herself for the things she has done. He then clarifies his earlier words, stating that the only thing he dislikes is seeing her hate herself. Overwhelmed by his unexpected validation, tears stream down her face as she thanks him. He simply replies that he's glad he could be of help. In that moment, she understands that the rumors about him being a pervert degenerate are completely false, while Kuro internally despairs at how far that nickname has spread. As the emotional tension breaks, he blushes and suggests it might be a good time for her to get dressed. Just as he pulls his hands away, she hesitates for a moment. She reminds him that, despite everything, the fact remains that this is their wedding night. When she asks if he intends to embrace her, he gives a firm and direct no. She assures him that she is no longer acting out of desperation. He gently explains that she doesn't need to rush to find her place here, as they will have a lifetime together as husband and wife to figure things out. A profound sense of relief washes over her, and she thanks him for his kindness. At the same time, she feels a slight, almost imperceptible, twinge of disappointment, a feeling immediately followed by the surprise of him leaning in to kiss her forehead. She lets out a flustered gasp, her face flushing crimson from the unexpected intimacy. He smiles, remarking that it's best not to force things for now. She playfully calls him mean, and he laughs, agreeing that it's probably time they both got dressed. Later, they sit and talk, discussing the lands she will now call home and the life they will build together. Violet finds the time spent with him to be peaceful and surprisingly comfortable. A new day dawns, bright and clear. Gray greets Kuro with a smug, knowing grin and offers his congratulations. Annoyed by the entirely predictable reaction, Kuro tells him to stop it. When Kuro reveals that nothing happened, Gray's teasing shifts to insults, calling him spineless, much to Kuro's exasperation. He recounts the previous night, explaining that they merely talked until Violet, exhausted from her journey, fell asleep mid-conversation. He then carried her to her own room, careful not to wake her despite her cute sleep-talking. Gray's expression softens, and he says he's glad Kuro was kind to her, as he had been worried about her state of exhaustion. His mood quickly shifts back to mischief, however, as he cheers Kuro on for his plan to win her over in her vulnerable state, a suggestion that horrifies Kuro. Gray compliments him, noting it was a surprisingly smooth move for someone so unpopular, but Kuro dismisses the praise, saying he simply spoke from the heart. He reflects that everyone has their flaws and strengths, and he only wanted her to see beyond her past mistakes. As Kuro speaks, Gray listens intently, seeming to understand his master's intentions. Their conversation is interrupted by Violet, who rushes in apologizing for having overslept, but Kuro reassures her that it is perfectly fine. He wishes her a good morning, and she shyly returns the greeting. She then turns to Gray, thanking him for the relaxing bath, and he expresses his delight that she enjoyed it. Gray observes that her expression is much brighter than it was the day before. He suggests it might be thanks to her conversation with Kuro, a comment that makes Violet blush as she recalls the events of the night. She thinks back to the forehead kiss, an intimacy she never experienced with the prince, and admits to herself that while it was embarrassing, it was not unpleasant. Gray, misinterpreting the mood, once again declares that lying is the first step to perversion, earning a sharp rebuke from Kuro. The assistant's continued congratulations and teasing about their wedding night lead to a lengthy, hour-long effort by Kuro to clear up the misunderstanding. Later, after they have finished a meal, Kuro asks Violet if she enjoyed the food, and she praises its simple yet gentle flavor. As they finish eating, Gray steps forward with a serious expression, announcing that he has something to discuss with them now that they are a married couple. Gray steps forward, announcing that he has a matter to discuss with the newly married couple. With a hopeful blush, he asks if he might be allowed to call Violet mother. Both Kuro and Violet are rendered speechless by the unexpected request. Violet finally breaks the silence with a shriek of confusion, prompting Kuro to scold Gray for his abruptness. When Violet asks if Gray is not his secretary, Kuro clarifies that while that is his title publicly, their true relationship is different. He reveals that Gray is not only his secretary but also his son. As Gray stands quietly, Kuro begins to explain their history. Kuro found Gray in the mansion when he first arrived. The boy was weak and had been treated as a slave by the previous lord, able only to whisper hollowly in response to him. Over time, Kuro helped him heal and open up, eventually giving him the Hartfield surname as their bond deepened. Violet quietly takes in this revelation. Understanding that Gray is Kuro's adopted son, she listens as Gray explains that he makes his request now that she is Kuro's wife, knowing it would be improper for a baron to formally adopt someone of his background. Her mind processes the fact that despite slavery being officially outlawed, situations like Gray's still exist. A sudden realization dawns on her, and her entire demeanor changes as she grasps the fact that this makes her a mother. With renewed purpose, she turns to face Gray. With a radiant and theatrical air, she declares that he may indeed call her mother, leaving Kuro baffled by her sudden enthusiasm. Gray, ever the formalist, notes that a noble would typically use Okasama or Hai instead. They begin to earnestly discuss various formal titles of address, with Kuro wondering just how serious they are being. He quickly realizes that Violet, at least, is completely invested, her eyes sparkling with genuine excitement. She then ponders what she should call him to foster their new bond, landing on the affectionate Gray-chama. Gray emotionally addresses her as Mother Violet, and she responds with an equally emotional Gray-chama. The two share a heartfelt embrace as Kuro watches on, completely left behind by their sudden, intense bonding moment. Kuro realizes his initial assessment of Violet was wrong. She isn't the arrogant villainess from the game, but rather a sheltered, naive, and highly impressionable young woman. Violet explains that she's been reflecting on her past rigidity and has resolved to be more flexible. As such, she declares her first goal is to embrace motherhood and raise Gray-chama, well, a sentiment Kuro gently tries to temper by reminding her she doesn't have to accept everything so readily. Gray, however, is simply happy and thanks her for her kindness. Deciding it would be tactless to interfere further, Kuro steps back. He does, however, insist that for appearances, they maintain their formal titles in public, much to Violet's slight disappointment. With the matter settled, Kuro announces that he will give her a tour of the lands that afternoon. When he mentions he and Gray have urgent work to attend to first, Violet immediately insists on joining them. She earnestly pleads with him, stating that as his wife, she has a duty to understand his work. Her sincere request flusters Kuro, and Gray teases him for his lack of experience with women. Kuro reluctantly agrees but warns her to be prepared for what she's about to see. He cautions her that the work of a lord in this territory is far from the elegant affair she might imagine. She is left utterly aghast, questioning if what she is witnessing can truly be a lord's duty. Dressed in simple work clothes, Kuro and Gray stand before a large pile of dark soil. Violet can only stare, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. When she finally asks what they are doing, they cheerfully reply that they are preparing a field for planting. They explain their tasks of spreading fertilizer and tilling the land, which Violet slowly accepts as a necessary, if undignified, reality of their remote station. Resolved to fulfill her new role as the lady of the house, she volunteers to help spread the fertilizer. The moment she gets close to the barrel, she is hit with the powerful stench of what Kuro explains is organic fertilizer made from cow and pig manure. After she recovers, a local woman arrives with her children, warmly greeting Kuro and offering to let them rest while she and Gray finish the work. The woman gifts them vegetables from her own field and playfully teases Kuro for showing off in front of his lovely new wife. Though she was taught that nobility should never engage in manual labor, Violet finds the easy, heartwarming rapport between the Lord and his people to be a wonderful thing. Her pleasant observation is interrupted when one of the locals compliments Kuro by saying he's a man dripping with fertilizer, causing him to spill the bucket in shock. He quietly muses that it will likely take Violet some time to acclimate to this life, earning a sharp look from Gray for reading her mind. Several hours pass. After changing, Kuro begins the formal tour of the town, starting with its impressive church, a remnant of a more prosperous era. Kuro explains that many residents are former inhabitants, but the territory also attracts those who have failed elsewhere and have nowhere else to go. It is a place for outcasts from the capital, people who are, in many ways, just like him. Violet correctly deduces this means the church is likely staffed by disgraced clergy, and Kuro agrees they should go meet them. They step into the vast, silent nave of the church. Kuro observes that it appears the priest and sister are out at the moment. Suddenly, Violet cries out his name in warning. A figure descends from the ceiling, shouting about a sooty black traitor. An explosive force erupts as the figure attacks. Violet reacts instantly, shoving Kuro out of the path of the attack. She intercepts a powerful kick aimed at her husband. As Kuro hits the ground, he wryly notes the rather aggressive greeting. He twists away just as his assailant launches another attack. The attacker flips through the air and lands gracefully. She seems impressed that he was able to dodge a kick from a messenger of God. Pointing an accusatory finger, she declares that divine punishment will befall him. Just then, other people arrive, casually greeting the attacker, Cyan, and her companion, Rei, while Kuro questions the appropriateness of a divine messenger delivering dropkicks. Kuro calmly asks Cyan to explain what she meant by calling him a traitor. Cyan replies that her meaning was quite literal. She accuses him of committing the great sin of betraying her, leaving Violet to wonder what on earth he could have possibly done. A brief summary recalls the previous events where a sister from the local church, Cyan, accused Kuro of betraying her. Kuro, completely lost, asks what he could have possibly done to betray her, but she just smirks, telling him he clearly doesn't understand. She points an accusatory finger directly at him. She yells that his decision to get married without considering her or the priest is an act of betrayal, to which he retorts that his marriage is none of her business. Cyan dramatically laments her unrequited love for the handsome priest, Snow White, prompting an exasperated Kuro to suggest she simply confess her feelings to him. Changing subjects with whiplash speed, she introduces herself as Cyan Sears, tells Violet she's far too beautiful for Kuro, and generously offers to plan their wedding ceremony. She finishes her introduction by stating her official role as the sister of the church. When Violet politely introduces herself, Cyan immediately shortens her name to the affectionate Io-chan. After giving a surprised Violet a tight hug, Cyan announces she has errands to run and departs as quickly as she arrived. Kuro remarks that she was like a storm, while Gray asks Violet if she has any concerns. Violet quietly recalls a piece of trivia. She believes church officials are forbidden from wearing undergarments due to their doctrine. This makes her question Cyan's revealing dress, which had a slit so high that any sudden movement would surely expose her. A brief flashback to Cyan's flying kick confirms her suspicions. Violet turns to Kuro and asks if he saw anything during the attack, causing him to fluster and vehemently deny it. He insists that he feels no improper attraction to Cyan, but his denial only makes Violet mutter his unfortunate nickname, Pervert Degenerate. She reasons that if he was so calm when she was undressed, he must be accustomed to such sights, a conclusion that makes Kuro internally scream about the massive effort it took to maintain his composure. Gray, meanwhile, watches the exchange with delight, holding a fan and declaring it their first lovers' quarrel. Kuro quickly shuts down the argument and redirects their attention to continuing the tour of the territory. He silently hopes they will not encounter any more people with such overwhelming personalities. His hopes are immediately dashed as a mysterious, hooded figure appears before them. The figure chuckles and congratulates Kuro on his marriage to the rumored bride. Kuro introduces her as Orchid, a generally kind local who just happens to be deeply devoted to black magic. Before they can move on, another man named Ivory rushes over, having spotted the scrape on Kuro's hand, and introduces himself as the local doctor. Kuro explains that Ivory is a brilliant but eccentric doctor who gets a thrill from treating injuries, a fact Ivory confirms by cheerfully offering to treat Violet should she get hurt before propositioning her for a polygamous marriage. He is followed by another man, Kaki Roberts, whom Kuro describes as a flirtatious fool who at least has the decency to back down when a woman says no. A young girl in a witch's costume named Apricot then gives Violet a grandiose and poetic welcome to the untamed lands. Their eccentric parade is joined by a large, clanking robot that Kuro explains is very popular with the town's children. He whispers to Violet that the person inside the armor is just a shy man named Blonde. A timid greeting emanates from the robot as the eclectic group of residents assembles. After the overwhelming introductions, Violet looks completely exhausted. Back at the mansion, Kuro gives her a cup of tea to help her recover from the ordeal. She diplomatically describes the townspeople as unique individuals. A description Gray notes is putting it very mildly. Gray then presents a wedding gift from Kaki, a book with a completely blacked-out cover, which Kuro immediately orders him to throw away. Kaki had apparently claimed the book's contents were perfect for a newlywed couple's first night. The implication sends Kuro into a rage, and he prepares to go and give Kaki a piece of his mind. Violet sinks into her chair with a sigh, remarking that this place is truly full of oddballs. Kuro can only agree with her assessment. Noticing the late hour, he offers to make dinner, explaining to a surprised Violet that he and Gray take turns with the cooking. She realizes that with no other staff, they truly are self-sufficient. He decides to make a simple meal for the tired Violet, using the vegetables they were gifted by the locals. Later, Violet reflects on her day, calling Shiki a strange and wondrous place. She tries to find a better word than strange to describe the people but eventually agrees with her initial assessment. She finds it remarkable that almost everyone they met warmly congratulated them on their marriage, a feeling of acceptance she hasn't experienced since her engagement to the prince. She concludes that despite the odd residents and the negative rumors she'd heard, this doesn't seem to be a bad land after all, a statement Kuro playfully chides her for. As she smiles, however, he notices a deep, lingering sadness in her eyes. He suspects that meeting so many new people is forcing her to remember her time at the academy. He guesses that she is trying to convince herself that this is a good place as a way to push past the painful memories of her past life. He understands that it may take a long time for her to truly heal and move on. Nevertheless, he finds himself hoping that one day she will grow to genuinely love Shiki and its people. Violet sits in quiet contemplation. 3 weeks have passed since her arrival. Life is certainly less convenient than it was at the academy, but with the help of Kuro and Gray, she has slowly started to adapt to her new surroundings. Her thoughts turn to Gray, a former slave who is also a remarkably talented girl with an affinity for all magic types. She sees a painful parallel between the previous lord who abused Gray and her own past actions of looking down on the commoner heroine simply because of her birth. This realization leads her to question if she, who has inflicted similar pain on others, is truly worthy of being a mother to a child with such a wounded heart. Her somber reflection is interrupted by Gray dramatically practicing a new spell, prompting Kuro to yell at him to just cut the weeds normally. She calls out to Gray, a look of concern on her face. She gently asks if he is burdened by any painful thoughts or memories. Gray smiles brightly and replies that while there are painful things in his past, he also has a great joy, being accepted as the child of both her and Kuro. Moved by his words, she asks why he is so willing to accept her as his mother. He explains that since Kuro accepted him without prejudice and gave him a home and a name, he will gladly accept anyone his master has chosen as a wife. Violet recalls the words of the townspeople, all of whom spoke of Kuro with deep respect and affection. It strikes her that in only 3 years, Kuro, a man just a few years older than herself, has managed to build such a strong bond with his people. Yet, he remains an enigma to her, a man who sometimes seems far older than his years and speaks of her past with an impossible level of detail. As they head out to the fields again, he gently places a straw hat on her head to shield her from the sun. She finds herself wondering why this strange, kind man continues to care for her without casting her aside. A genuine smile lights up her face as she resolves to learn everything she can about him. She thinks that perhaps, by walking alongside him in this new land, she can finally find her own place. Her hopeful thought is cut short by a disembodied voice delivering a cryptic message from someone named Hina. Don't get carried away. A cloaked figure delivers a chilling message from Violet's father. Do not get carried away. The words send a deep, visceral chill through Violet, but as she stands beside Kuro and Gray, she feels a burgeoning desire to become someone worthy of admiration, just as he is. She recognizes the figure as one of her father's spies and understands the implied threat behind the warning, a stark contrast to the noble ideal she's supposed to embody. Having delivered the message, the spy vanishes as quickly as she appeared. Violet reflects on the cruel and unreasonable nature of her father, knowing he has never truly cared for her well-being. Just as she was beginning to glimpse the kind of person she wanted to become, this reminder of his control threatens to extinguish that hope. She resolves that she cannot pursue her own desires if it means bringing trouble upon Kuro and the people of this land. Putting on a brave face, she apologizes to Kuro for the delay and urges him to continue onward. He asks her what's wrong, but she deflects, claiming she was merely admiring the scenery. Kuro presses further, noting that her complexion seems poor and asking if she feels unwell. She brushes off his concern, insisting she is perfectly healthy and that it's just a shadow from her hat. She marches forward, hoping she has successfully managed to deceive him, though she knows he is perceptive. Their progress is halted when Gray calls out, pointing toward a field of crops that has been completely destroyed. As the town's residents gather around the devastation, Cyan asks if their only course of action is to defend the town. Kuro quickly takes command, ordering those who can fight to remain on standby in the town while he scouts the surrounding area for the creature responsible. He instructs Violet to stay behind where it's safe, but she firmly refuses, stating her intention to go with him. Whatever her father's intentions may be, she declares, her duty as a noble is now to protect the people of this land from harm. They venture into the forest together on a monster subjugation mission. When she asks if such missions are common, he replies that they're not unusual and warns her to watch her step. He points out that the path is muddy and treacherous from the previous night's rain. He asks if she has any experience fighting in this kind of environment, acknowledging that it's different from the training she received at the academy. She confirms she's trained at a site just outside the academy, which triggers a memory for Kuro of several in-game event illustrations from that location. He recalls specific romantic scenes where characters would stumble on the rough terrain and fall into each other's arms. Violet admits she is still unaccustomed to walking on the soft earth. Kuro reassures her, stating that partners are meant to help each other, and he's noticed her genuine efforts to adapt to her new life. He sees that while she struggles, she is trying her best to adjust to the unfamiliar rural lifestyle. Aware of her tragic fate in every route of the game, Cass's, he feels a strong resolve to watch over and protect her. Anxious about the townspeople's safety, she tries to hurry forward but slips on the muddy path. She shuts her eyes, bracing for a painful fall. The impact never comes. Kuro catches her just in time, asking if she's all right. She thanks him for saving her, and he expresses his relief that she wasn't injured. Held securely in his arms, she is surprised by his unexpected strength. He suddenly quiets her, having heard the distinct sound of splashing water nearby. The sound of splashing water grows louder through the trees. When Violet asks if there's a river, Kuro confirms there isn't one in this area and notes the sound is too large for a simple puddle. Violet worries it might be a giant monster and suggests they should retreat to get reinforcements. Their decision is complicated when they hear a woman's voice mixed with the growls of a monster. Realizing they have no time to spare, Violet quickly casts magic to mask their scent and presence. They race towards the sound, spotting steam rising from a clearing ahead. Peeking through the foliage, they see the silhouettes of a woman surrounded by a pack of monsters in the mist. Violet immediately unleashes a gust of wind to clear the steam and reveal the scene. As the steam dissipates, a bizarre sight is revealed. A completely naked woman with long, dark hair is posing gracefully in a newly formed hot spring. The surrounding monsters are not attacking, but howling as if in admiration of her beauty. She strikes various poses for her audience of beasts, asking them how she looks from different angles. Violet asks if this kind of spectacle is normal for Shiki, but Kuro insists that a naked woman bathing with monsters in a random hot spring is decidedly not normal. The woman is, without a doubt, a pervert, admiring her own body's golden ratio. Kuro feels a nagging sense of déjà vu, as if he's seen this woman somewhere before. The woman notices their presence and invites them to come out from hiding and admire her openly. Panicked, Kuro realizes they've been spotted by the exhibitionist despite Violet's concealment magic. He considers the danger they might be in if she is a monster tamer in control of the surrounding beasts. The woman's cheerful encouragement for her children to welcome the newcomers makes the situation feel more absurd than threatening. With their cover blown, Violet dispels the magic hiding them. The woman welcomes the young art appreciators, thanking them for the fated meeting in such a remote place. She eyes them curiously and asks if they are lovers. She then apologizes to Violet, assuming she might be insecure about her boyfriend seeing another woman's naked body. She confidently declares that there's no need to worry, as their love should be enough to overcome any comparison, though she doubts their love can surpass the beauty of her own body. Kuro struggles to hold back a mortified and increasingly angry Violet. Realizing this is going nowhere, he steps forward, tells Violet to stand back, and formally introduces himself as Kuro Heartfield, the local lord. He asks for her name, and she acknowledges his title with a slight smile. The woman's face and name suddenly click into place in Kuro's mind. He recognizes her as a character from the same Otome game, a dangerous individual who could lead to a bad end depending on the player's choices. A cloaked woman appears, delivering a message from her master that she is to apologize on behalf of her children for the trouble they've caused. Kuro and Violet stare blankly, caught off guard by the formal apology. Kuro asks the woman, Schwartz, why she acted so bizarrely at the hot spring, and she replies that it's a long story. She launches into a passionate speech, declaring her belief that artistry is heightened when something normally unseen is revealed. With a flourish, she concludes her speech, leaving Kuro to comment on how short her long story was and how little sense it made. Schwartz then turns to the snarling wolf-like creatures and addresses them as her children. At her unspoken command, the entire pack of monsters turns and retreats back into the forest. Violet asks her directly if she is a monster tamer. Schwartz explains that she doesn't command monsters, but can communicate with them, and this group simply started following her during her travels, causing the damage to the fields because they were lost. She clarifies that she calls them her children as a term of endearment, not because she controls them. As she speaks, Kuro remembers a crucial, violent detail from the game that reveals she is far more dangerous than she lets on. He recalls that Schwartz is an assassin character in Casas, and while her path never involved Violet in the game, Violet's current exile is an entirely new scenario, making the future unpredictable. With her true nature in mind, Kuro decides the best course of action is to remain cautious and avoid provoking her, even as she speaks cryptically. He questions why she is so willing to follow them into town, and Violet asks her to confirm her name. Violet then requests a moment to speak with Schwartz alone, much to Kuro's surprise. Schwartz teases her, asking if Violet has developed an interest in her art. Violet ignores the jest and asks directly if her father, the Duke, sent her. She inwardly notes that Schwartz lacks the malevolent aura of her father's other spy, wondering if this is all an act. Believing she must protect her new home, Violet makes Schwartz promise not to bring harm to Kuro or the people of Shiki. Schwartz feigns ignorance, claiming to be nothing more than a simple traveler who stopped by on a whim. Her act is convincing, and Violet begins to question whether her own suspicions are unfounded. Kuro calls out to Violet, breaking her train of thought. He asks what they were discussing, but Schwartz interjects, asking to be guided to the people whose property was damaged so she can offer an apology and compensation. Although Kuro says it's unnecessary, Schwartz insists, declaring that it would be unbecoming to ignore the trouble her companions caused. Kuro is taken aback by her principled stance, which is so different from the ruthless character in the game, but he remains wary. Sensing no immediate hostility from her, he agrees to lead her into the main town. As they arrive, a concerned Gray rushes out to greet them. Schwartz introduces herself to Gray and asks him to take her to Cyan and the others so she can make amends. Kuro explains to Schwartz that there are 3 places to stay in Shiki: the inn, the church, or his mansion. Schwartz announces her plan to stay for about a week and requests a room at the inn called the Rainbow, a request Kuro grants while pondering her true motives. As she speaks, her use of Gray's name catches Kuro's attention. His mind immediately jumps to the possibility that she's on a secret mission concerning Gray's past, perhaps sent by a noble family to retrieve him. He silently vows to protect Gray, only for Schwartz to comment on what a beautiful boy he is. She then leans in and suggestively asks Gray to play with her, confirming Kuro's suspicion that she is, at her core, simply a pervert. The innocent Gray, completely misinterpreting her intentions, cheerfully agrees to play cards or other games with her after he finishes his duties. Schwartz is delighted by his wholesome response, enthusiastically declaring her skill at poker and other games. Both Kuro and Violet are left stunned and speechless by the bizarre turn of events. Schwartz expresses her love for learning local games and asks Gray to teach her, to which he agrees with Kuro's permission. Kuro gives his consent, provided they don't cause a disturbance, and wonders if his own mind is becoming warped by the strangeness of his life. Later that night at the Rainbow Inn, Schwartz triumphantly lays down a full house. Across the table, Kuro, Ivory, and Kaki groan in defeat. Violet remarks on Schwartz's impressive skill at cards as Gray watches with concern. Schwartz declares that winning so easily is becoming boring. To add tension to the game, she proposes a new rule: if she wins, she will remove an article of clothing. She then immediately reveals a royal straight flush and announces it's time to create art, prompting Kuro to accuse her of just wanting an excuse to get naked. As she disrobes, Ivory wonders aloud if she's hit her head, but Kuro confirms she has been this way since they met her. While the other men get excited, Kuro yells at the perverts to stop encouraging her. The night continues in a chaotic fashion. As they leave the inn, Kuro admits he got carried away by the heated game, while Gray says he had a wonderful time. Kuro is deeply confused by how different Schwartz is from her ruthless game counterpart, even wondering if she could be a different person with the same name. His thoughts are shattered when he suddenly shouts Gray's name in alarm. A shadowy arm wraps around Gray from behind. Kuro berates himself for letting his guard down, instantly fearing that Schwartz's true, dangerous nature has emerged and she is targeting Gray. However, Schwartz merely gives Gray a warm, drunken hug, thanking him for the fun evening and promising to play again soon. Utterly relieved, Kuro realizes it was just a hug from a drunk woman. The eventful and confusing night finally comes to a close. The next day, a panicked Violet rushes up to Gray, asking if he's alright after his encounter with Schwartz. Gray assures her he's fine, explaining that he spent the morning showing Schwartz around town, where she apologized to the villagers and played with the local children. He describes her as being great with kids and very fun, a description that horrifies Violet, who believes Gray has been corrupted. When Gray asks why she is so wary of Schwartz, Violet can't bring herself to answer. Kuro reflects that while he was initially suspicious, Schwartz has done nothing but good since her arrival, generously compensating the villagers and getting along with everyone. Violet angrily asks if Kuro has been captivated by Schwartz's body, an accusation he flatly denies. He finds the entire situation ridiculous. Her behavior is so contrary to her game persona that being on guard feels foolish. Meanwhile, Schwartz stands alone in her room at the inn. She communicates with a magical device, reporting to a client that she has arrived in Shiki as requested. The client on the other end confirms her mission, the assassination of Lady Violet Valentine. The client adds that the target is no longer a Valentine, and Schwartz confirms she understands, her playful persona gone, revealing it was all an act as the story is set to continue. In a sunlit courtyard, Schwartz playfully catches a laughing child. The other children eagerly await their turn to play tag with her, as Gray watches from a nearby window. Violet observes that Schwartz seems to be having fun, and Kuro notes that she has made no suspicious moves in the days since her arrival. Violet interrupts his thoughts, bringing him a document and asking for clarification on a new law from the capital. He explains that it pertains to a complex land dispute between powerful nobles, which is why news of it wouldn't have reached their remote territory. After helping her, Kuro gently brushes a stray hair from her forehead, observing that she seems to be engrossed in her work lately. He thought she had begun to relax, but now he senses she's burying herself in tasks as if trying to outrun something from her past. She admits there are several other documents that she's finding difficult to interpret on her own. The first is a bill from a neighboring town for robot dispatch fees, which Kuro casually approves, explaining that it's a routine, if bizarre, expense. The next is an invitation to an Evil God Advent festival, which he clarifies is just Orchid's fancy name for a black cat appreciation meeting. He immediately rejects a request from Apricot to use public funds to build a structure for testing her magic. Similarly, he dismisses requests from Ivory and Kaki regarding women, vowing to deal with Kaki later. Violet remarks that the duties of a lord are far more bizarre than she imagined, but Kuro assures her this level of strangeness is unique to Shiki. His attention is drawn outside, where he spots Cyan confronting Schwartz. A loud argument erupts from the courtyard. Cyan has Schwartz by the collar, accusing her of being a liar. She demands that Schwartz confess, insisting that the matter is urgent. Schwartz remains calm, asking Cyan to explain what she's talking about. Cyan refuses to listen, repeating her demand that Schwartz stop playing dumb. With a cry of divine punishment, Cyan throws a powerful punch. The blow connects with a solid crack. Schwartz catches the fist effortlessly, calmly stating that resorting to violence is not beautiful. She adds that Cyan's attire lacks elegance, a comment that only fuels the sisters' rage. Suddenly, Schwartz's expression shifts to one of surprise. She has noticed Gray and the other children watching them with fear in their eyes. Seeing the children are afraid, Schwartz's tone softens, and she again asks Cyan to explain what is wrong. Just then, one of the local women runs towards the mansion, desperately calling for help. Kuro and Violet rush outside to see what the commotion is about. A frantic Cyan points to a crying woman, explaining that her child has been taken. The mother, Blue, sobs that her son was snatched by a monster. Rain begins to fall as the situation grows more dire. Blue, a local resident, explains that her son, Light Blue, was taken by a dire wolf. She recounts how the creature appeared out of nowhere, grabbed her son, and vanished into the woods with terrifying speed. Cyan immediately glares at Schwartz, who swears on her faith that she had nothing to do with it. Kuro watches her carefully, noting that she seems to be telling the truth and has only shown kindness to the children thus far. He then turns to Schwartz, acknowledging that the version of her he knows from his past would be capable of such an act. Trusting his instincts, he asks for her help in searching for the boy. He quickly organizes the search parties, pairing himself with Schwartz to investigate one area while Violet goes with Apricot and the others to check the caves. He leaves Ivory and the priest on standby at the church to treat any injuries and tells the others to signal with magic if they find anything. When Schwartz questions his trust in her, Violet speaks up, stating that she trusts Kuro's judgment completely. With the plan decided, the groups quickly head out into the woods. As he and Schwartz search, Kuro finds no tracks from the dire wolf but feels that something is wrong. Schwartz confirms his suspicion, explaining that dire wolves are naturally weak and rarely attack humans. She elaborates that they are fragile creatures and avoid confrontation with larger beings. Using her ability to speak with animals, she learns from a small bird that there are no mutated dire wolves in the area, a skill Kuro finds immensely helpful. While they continue their search, Gray calls out for the missing boy. Schwartz stops and asks Kuro why he trusted her enough to let her join the search party. He replies that he saw the genuine joy on her face when she played with the children, a happiness he knew couldn't be faked. Her conversation is interrupted by the chirping of another bird. Kuro asks her what's wrong. She translates the bird's message: it has spotted the child nearby. They immediately rush off, with Kuro instructing Gray to prepare a spell just in case. As they get closer, they hear the sounds of a child's laughter mixed with a monster's growl, and Kuro prays that he's unharmed. They break into a clearing to find Light Blue happily riding the dire wolf like a horse. The boy spots them and cheerfully asks if they've come to play, too. He explains that the horse wanted to play, so he fed it snacks, completely unaware that he had been abducted. Schwartz gently scolds the wolf and sends it back to its pack, while Gray fires a magic signal into the air to announce that the boy is safe. Back in the village, Blue sees the signal and looks up with hope. Light Blue runs into his mother's arms. The two share a tearful, joyous reunion. Kuro smiles, relieved that the crisis has been resolved peacefully. The heartwarming moment is broken by Light Blue telling his mother her makeup is running, and the group shares a laugh. Ivory then bursts onto the scene, frantically asking if the boy is injured and demanding to examine the rare case of a monster abduction. He tries to drag the boy to his clinic, prompting Kuro to mutter that he's going to get arrested for kidnapping one day. With the excitement over, Schwartz announces her return to the inn, and Kuro thanks her for her help. She tells him not to worry about it, saying a warm welcome on her next visit is all the thanks she needs. As they watch her depart, a thoughtful silence falls over the group. Gray quietly gets Kuro's attention, and Kuro acknowledges that he understands. He asks Gray for his thoughts, and Gray confirms that dire wolves have never abducted anyone in Shiki before, making the playful kidnapping highly suspicious. Meanwhile, Schwartz explains to the wolf that it was likely drawn to the boy's sweets because it was hungry and lost from its pack. Kuro knows he can neither confirm nor deny if the event was a coincidence, but he resolves to increase their vigilance just in case. He suddenly stops, a realization dawning on him as he looks around. He tells Gray that he cannot see her, and worries that she didn't see the signal and is still searching. A sense of dread fills him as he fears that this can only mean something has happened to Violet. A dark background sets a somber tone. Violet is shown casting a healing spell on the injured Cyan. Apricot thanks Violet for her assistance with the first aid. She then reassures the wounded Cyan, telling her to rest, an offer Cyan gratefully accepts. Violet admits to herself that she still finds Apricot's theatrical way of speaking difficult to comprehend. She makes a mental note to ask Kuro for clarification later, adding the grim thought, "If I survive." Her dark premonition is realized as a massive, monstrous wolf lunges from the shadows. Cyan immediately identifies the terrifying beast as a Fenrir. She expresses her shock, knowing that such a creature is not native to Shiki and should not be attacking without provocation. Apricot quickly chants an incantation, unleashing a blast of fire to distract the monster. Cyan shouts that the beast is momentarily stunned and urges the others to flee while they have the chance. As they turn to run, Violet's previously injured ankle gives out from under her. Cyan cries out Violet's nickname, Io-chan, in alarm. The Fenrir's massive claw swipes through the air toward the fallen Violet. In a selfless act, Cyan throws herself in front of Violet, taking the full force of the blow. The impact sends her flying backward through the air. The others rush to her side, telling her to get away while they provide cover. As the rain pours down, Schwartz appears in the forest, her expression unreadable. She quietly declares that it is now time for her to get to work. Wiping a smear of blood from her face, she steels herself for the task ahead. Back in the cave, the others tend to Cyan's wounds. Cyan insists she is fine but warns that they need to leave, as provoking the beast further would be foolish. Apricot agrees to lead the way out of the dangerous area. Violet is overcome with a sense of helplessness, feeling that she has been nothing but a burden. She laments that she, who should be in a position to protect others, has become the one needing protection. Suddenly, a thick, disorienting mist fills the cave. The strange fog makes them feel dizzy and weak. One by one, they collapse to the ground, overcome by the mist's mysterious effect. A figure calmly walks through the mist toward the unconscious group. It is Schwartz, who apologizes for putting them to sleep but assures them they will not be harmed. Violet, the last to succumb, realizes with dawning horror that her initial suspicions about the woman were correct. She desperately wonders if Schwartz's apparent kindness towards the children had all been a lie. With the others unconscious, Schwartz stands over Violet and announces that she will now carry out her mission to kill her. The Fenrir appears at her side, and she gently apologizes for letting it get injured. She instructs the beast to guard the entrance and drive away anyone who might try to interfere. Mustering her strength, Violet struggles back to her feet, ready to face her assassin. Schwartz draws her sword but offers to answer some of Violet's questions before fulfilling her contract. Violet admits that there are many things she doesn't understand. The one thing she knows for certain, however, is that this entire situation was orchestrated by Schwartz for the sole purpose of killing her. She demands to know the meaning of this, and Schwartz confirms that those were her orders. Schwartz recites her client's message, that Violet is a disgrace to her former house and must be eliminated before she can bring further shame upon them. Hearing the cold, familiar words, Violet's spirit breaks, and she quietly accepts her fate. Schwartz remarks that Violet truly has a poor judge of character. The voices of her parents and the prince echo in her mind, all calling her selfish and unworthy of love. A small, desperate part of her still hopes that the order for her death did not come from the prince. She feels that her efforts to change since coming to Shiki have been for nothing, as she has been deemed irredeemable. A bitter laugh escapes her lips as she resigns herself to being a bringer of misfortune until the very end. Schwartz simply watches her, her expression unreadable. She tells Violet not to speak of herself that way, stating that her death and her being a plague god are separate matters, and that she personally disagreed with the mission. Violet angrily accuses her of hypocrisy, pointing out that she manipulated a child and endangered everyone to set this trap. Schwartz explains that her client ordered her to use one of her children to create the opportunity, and the client's impatience led to the boy's abduction. She offers this explanation as her own form of atonement for what is about to happen. With the conversation over, she declares that it is time to finish her job. A quiet moment hangs in the air of the damp cave. Schwartz promises that Cyan and Apricot will be unharmed and that she will have the Fenrir treated for its injuries. Violet finds it strange, but she feels a sense of relief wash over her. She is simply glad that no one else will die because of her. She recalls Kuro's kind words, telling her to be proud of the efforts she made for the one she loved. Her greatest regret is that she and Kuro were never able to truly become husband and wife. She wonders if he will mourn her death or be relieved by her absence. Schwartz quietly suggests that he might be a little sad, and reassures Violet that no one else will be harmed. In a flash of movement, a figure appears behind Schwartz. An unseen assailant attacks the assassin from behind. A magic circle flares to life, blocking the blow. The attacker moves with incredible speed, pressing the assault. From the ground, Violet struggles to see who has come to her aid. Though shorter than the prince she once admired, the back of the man standing before her seems impossibly large and strong. The man greets Schwartz casually, and Violet recognizes him as Kuro. He stands protectively between her and the assassin. He tells Schwartz coldly that he is not interested in hearing any of her excuses. The scene opens on the stone floor of a dark cave. Violet finishes casting a healing spell on the injured Cyan. She thanks Apricot for her help, grateful for the temporary relief from her pain. Apricot, in her characteristically dramatic fashion, tells Cyan not to worry and to take this time to rest and recover. Violet confesses that she still has trouble understanding Apricot's flowery language. She resolves to ask Kuro for a translation later, adding the grim caveat that she must survive this ordeal first. Her dark thought is interrupted by the sudden, ferocious appearance of a massive wolf-like beast. Cyan instantly recognizes the monster as a Fenrir. She is stunned, knowing such a powerful creature should not be in this region and that they are not known for unprovoked attacks. Apricot reacts quickly, summoning a blast of fire to create a diversion. Seeing the beast momentarily flinch from the flames, Cyan yells for the others to escape. As they turn to flee, Violet's previously injured ankle gives out, and she stumbles to the ground. Cyan cries out Violet's nickname in alarm as the Fenrir closes in. A massive claw swipes through the air, aimed directly at the fallen Violet. In a split-second decision, Cyan leaps in front of Violet, shielding her with her own body. The force of the blow sends Cyan flying across the cave. The others rush to her side as she struggles to recover from the powerful attack. Far from the cave, Schwartz stands alone in the pouring rain. With a grim expression, she announces that it's time to get to work. She wipes the rain and blood from her face, her resolve hardening. Back in the cave, the group tends to Cyan's fresh wounds. Despite her injury, Cyan urges them to leave, knowing they are no match for the Fenrir. Apricot agrees, volunteering to scout ahead for a safe path out of the cave. Violet feels a wave of shame, believing she has been nothing but a hindrance to them. She laments her weakness, thinking that she, as a noble, should have been the one protecting them. As she despairs, a thick, magical mist begins to fill the cavern. The disorienting fog makes them all feel weak and dizzy. One after another, they collapse, overwhelmed by the sleeping spell. A lone figure emerges from the mist, walking calmly toward the unconscious group. Schwartz stands over them, apologizing for her methods but assuring them that they will not be harmed. Violet, the last to succumb to the spell, realizes with a sinking heart that her initial suspicions were correct. She desperately wonders if all of Schwartz's apparent kindness had been an elaborate deception. The assassin looms over her, coolly stating that she is here to fulfill her contract and kill her. The Fenrir pads to her side, and she gently strokes its head, apologizing for letting it get injured in the fight. She orders the beast to guard the cave entrance and ensure no one interrupts them. With a surge of adrenaline, Violet forces herself to her feet, unwilling to die without a fight. Schwartz draws her sword but, contrary to her client's wishes, offers to answer some of Violet's questions first. Violet admits that her mind is filled with confusion and unanswered questions. The only thing she knows for certain is that Schwartz manipulated everything to lead to this moment. When she demands to know why, Schwartz simply confirms that she was hired to do a job. She then recites her client's order, to eliminate Violet before she can bring any more shame to her former family. Hearing the familiar condemnation, Violet's will to fight crumbles, and she accepts her fate. Schwartz remarks that Violet is a poor judge of character. The cruel words of her parents and the prince echo in her memory, all calling her selfish and unlovable. Even now, a small part of her wishes that the assassination order hadn't come from the prince. She feels that her efforts to change since coming to Shiki have been for naught, as she has been judged irredeemable. A bitter laugh escapes her as she calls herself a plague upon others until the very end. Schwartz listens silently to her despairing words. She then tells Violet not to say such things, revealing that she herself had opposed the mission. Violet spits back, accusing her of hypocrisy for using a child to set her trap. Schwartz explains that the impatient client insisted on using one of her monsters, which led to the accidental abduction of the boy. She calls this confession her own selfish attempt at atonement. With the conversation finished, she raises her sword, declaring that it is time to end this. The two women face each other in the silent, echoing cave. Schwartz promises that Cyan and Apricot will remain unharmed. Strangely, Violet feels a sense of relief at this assurance. She is glad that, in the end, no one else will have to die because of her. She remembers Kuro's words, telling her to be proud of who she is. Her final regret is that they were never able to become a true couple. She wonders if he would be saddened by her death, or simply relieved. Schwartz softly suggests that he might be a little sad, but tells her to rest easy. Suddenly, a flash of movement appears behind the assassin. Kuro lunges out of the shadows, striking with unexpected speed. A magic circle flares as he attacks Schwartz. He moves with a grace and power that stuns the assassin. Violet stares in disbelief, wondering who this person is. The back of the man protecting her seems impossibly large and reliable, far more so than the prince she once adored. It is Kuro, who greets Schwartz with a casual, almost mocking tone. He plants himself firmly between her and Violet, his body a shield. He tells the stunned assassin that he is not in the mood to listen to any of her excuses. Turning his back on the assassin, he kneels before Violet and asks her to accept something from him. He opens a small box, revealing a simple, elegant ring inside. The ring glimmers in the dim light of the cave. He looks her in the eye and tells her that no matter what happens, he will be by her side. From the entrance of the cave, Gray and Apricot watch the scene unfold with awe. Kuro admits he should have prepared the ring sooner. He stands before Violet, holding the ring box open. He takes her left hand, which he had been too shy to hold before, and admires its beauty. He tells her that despite everything, there is one thing he must say. He reminds her that he called the dutiful, self-hating version of her dislikable. He realizes he has never once told her that he likes her, a first for him in this life or his past one. He worries if his voice is shaking or if his expression is strange. He knows that he only feels this way because it's her. He thinks that even if their marriage started under unusual circumstances, it's not too late to fall in love. He gently pleads with her not to say such lonely things as, "It would be better if I weren't here." He tells her that he is by her side, and as a family, they will support each other. Through her tears, Violet asks if she is truly the one he wants. He smiles and tells her that she is the only one for him. Overwhelmed with emotion, she breaks down in tears of joy. He embraces her, resolving that he will never let her be alone again. She tearfully thanks him. A radiant smile breaks through her tears as she realizes she is no longer alone. He promises that he will always be by her side. She tells him how incredibly happy she is in that moment. Kuro becomes flustered, wondering if this is the right moment to hug her. He wants to, but worries it might be too forward given her fragile state. He glances over and sees Cyan and Apricot, who have since woken up, watching the scene intently. Apricot is thrilled to witness her first love confession, and Cyan explains that this is part of a couple's marital life. Kuro is mortified, realizing they've been awake for a while and worries they might have overheard details about the assassination plot. Cyan reassures him that they only woke up because of the thunder and congratulates them on their happy moment. She adds that she's glad Violet is safe. Violet looks at Cyan, thinking how truly kind-hearted she is. Cyan then complains that she deserves some praise too for fighting the Fenrir, but Kuro points out that she's the one who injured its eye. He offers her his shoulder to lean on, but she hesitates. He asks what's wrong. She asks with a blush if he is leaving her, misinterpreting his offer of support. She quickly says that he is too wonderful for someone like her and she shouldn't get too attached. The others watch on as Apricot suggests this is a ritual to bestow peace, which Cyan misinterprets as a kiss. Cyan declares that as a messenger of God, she will bear witness to their sacred act. Kuro is horrified at the prospect of having his first kiss in front of a nun and a chunibyo. Violet asks if he doesn't want to, and he internally screams that he does. Apricot and Cyan begin chanting for them to kiss. Kuro is flustered, thinking of where he should kiss her, his eyes drawn to her lips. The moment is interrupted when Cyan points at Apricot. Apricot lets out a loud sneeze, and Cyan notes that her clothes are soaked from the rain. Cyan looks at Apricot and then at her own body, which enrages Apricot, who thinks she wants her to undress. Violet, influenced by the chaotic atmosphere, asks if she should get undressed too, much to Kuro's horror. The scene descends into madness as Cyan and Apricot begin chanting "Undress," with Violet wondering if Schwartz's perversion is contagious. A new voice cuts through the chaos. It's Gray, who asks if they are planning to make him have 3 mothers. Kuro desperately shouts that it's all a misunderstanding. Several days later, back at the Lord's mansion, Gray reports that he is leaving to handle the transfer of the captured Fenrir and the aftermath of the incident. The details of Schwartz's assassination attempt have been kept secret from the public. The official story is that a stray Fenrir was captured and handed over. News that a B-rank monster attacked the town has spread, leading to increased security measures in the region and a mountain of paperwork for Kuro. Imperial guards are shown. Back in his study, Kuro offers to take a break, but Violet nervously says there's something she wants to confirm. She explains that she remembers him giving her the ring, but her memories after that are hazy. Kuro recalls that she became extremely emotional and clingy, a memory he decides to keep to himself. She worries that the entire event was a delusion, and that she even made the ring herself. He smiles, asking if she really thought it was all a dream, but she quickly insists she remembers his words. She blushes as she recounts his promise to be her ally and to support her as family. She admits that she is still unconfident and prone to being arrogant and oblivious. Kuro reassures her that no one is perfect and that he has flaws too, promising to help her work on anything she wants to change. She clenches her fist with determination. She asks if he promises not to abandon her, and he tells her that he wants them to work on such things together. He then tells her that it's okay for her to abandon him if she ever chooses to. He explains that she is not his property. She is free to be selfish and to speak her mind, because he wants to be with her regardless. He looks at her intently. He confesses that he wants to get to know and love Violet Heartfield, with all her flaws and virtues. He admits that at first, he only saw her as a character from a game, but now he wants to know her as his family. She laughs, and he remarks that he probably should have scolded her instead. She takes his hand, saying that she has yet to give him her answer. Gray is shown in the doorway. He stands watching them, a quiet observer of their budding relationship. Kuro admits he should have prepared the ring sooner. He stands before Violet, holding the ring box open. He takes her left hand, which he had been too shy to hold before, and admires its beauty. He tells her that despite everything, there is one thing he must say. He reminds her that he called the dutiful, self-hating version of her dislikable, but wants her to know that he is now her ally. It occurs to him that in either of his lives, he has never confessed his feelings to anyone before. He worries if his voice is shaking or if his expression is betraying his nervousness. He knows he only feels this vulnerable because of her, and tells her they can figure out what to do next together. As he slips the ring onto her finger, he thinks that it's never too late to fall in love, even after marriage. He pleads with her to never again say such lonely things as it would be better if she were gone. He promises that he is by her side and that as a family, they will support each other through everything. With tears in her eyes, she asks if she is truly the one he wants. He smiles warmly and confirms that she is the only one for him. Overwhelmed with emotion, she begins to cry with pure happiness. He pulls her into an embrace, vowing to himself that he will never let her be alone again. Through her sobs, she manages to thank him. A radiant, tearful smile spreads across her face as she finally realizes she is no longer alone. He gently promises that he will always be right beside her. She whispers that she is incredibly happy. Kuro becomes flustered, internally debating whether this is the appropriate moment to hug her properly. He desperately wants to, but hesitates, worrying it might be too forward given her fragile emotional state. His internal struggle is interrupted when he glances over and sees Cyan and Apricot, now awake, watching them with rapt attention. Apricot is thrilled to have witnessed what she calls a love confession, while Cyan wisely explains that this is simply part of a married couple's life. Kuro panics, realizing they've been awake for some time and worrying they might have overheard the sensitive details about the assassination plot. Cyan, however, reassures him that they only woke up from the recent clap of thunder and congratulates them on their heartwarming moment, glad that the Fenrir has been dealt with. She adds that she is relieved Violet is safe. Violet looks at Cyan, thinking what a truly kind-hearted person she is. Cyan then playfully demands some praise for her own bravery in fighting the Fenrir, prompting Kuro to dryly point out that she's the one who angered it in the first place. He offers his shoulder for her to lean on for support, but she hesitates. He asks her what's wrong. Blushing, she misinterprets his offer and asks if he is trying to leave her, quickly adding that he is too wonderful for someone like her anyway. The bizarre exchange continues as Apricot suggests a ritual to bestow peace, which Cyan immediately interprets as a kiss. Cyan enthusiastically declares that as a messenger of God, she will bear witness to their sacred act. Kuro is horrified at the prospect of having his first kiss in front of a hyperactive nun and a Chunibyu witch in training. Violet innocently asks if he doesn't want to, causing him to internally scream that he very much does. As Apricot and Cyan begin chanting for them to kiss, the pressure mounts. A flustered Kuro finds his eyes drawn to Violet's lips. The moment is broken when Cyan suddenly points at Apricot. Apricot lets out a loud sneeze, and Cyan observes that her clothes are soaked from the rain. Cyan looks meaningfully at Apricot and then at her own body, which Apricot misinterprets as a command to undress. Caught up in the madness, Violet asks if she should get undressed too, sending Kuro into a state of panic. The scene devolves into chaos as Cyan and Apricot begin chanting "Undress," and Violet wonders if Schwartz's perversion is somehow contagious. A new voice suddenly cuts through the noise, asking what is going on. Gray appears at the cave entrance, looking utterly bewildered. He deadpants, asking Kuro if he intends to give him 3 mothers. Kuro can only shout that it is all a huge misunderstanding. Several days later, back at the Lord's mansion, a sense of normalcy has returned. Gray reports that he is heading out to handle the official transfer of the captured Fenrir and the other post-incident procedures. The truth of the assassination attempt has been concealed from the public, replaced with the official story of a stray monster attack. News of a B-rank monster in the area has led to increased security and a mountain of tedious paperwork for Kuro. The involvement of Imperial soldiers adds another layer of complexity to the situation. Back in the study, Kuro suggests they take a break, but Violet nervously says there's something she needs to confirm. She confesses that while she remembers him giving her the ring, her memory of the events that followed is hazy. Kuro internally recalls her subsequent emotional breakdown and clinginess, a memory he decides to keep to himself for her sake. She worries that the entire tender moment was just a figment of her imagination, a dream born from her desperate state. He smiles, asking if she truly thought it was all a dream, but she quickly insists that she remembers his words clearly. Blushing deeply, she recounts his promises to be her ally and to support her as a member of his family. She then confesses her own insecurities, admitting she can be unloving, oblivious, and arrogant. Kuro reassures her that no one is perfect and that he has plenty of his own flaws, promising to help her work on anything she wants to change. She clenches her fist, a look of determination on her face. She asks if he promises not to abandon her, and he gently replies that they will work on her insecurities together. He then adds that she is free to abandon him if she ever feels the need to. He clarifies that she is not his property and is free to make her own choices. Whether she wants to be selfish or speak her mind, he wants her to be free because he wants to be with her regardless of her flaws. He looks at her with unwavering sincerity. He confesses that he wants to get to know and to love Violet Hartfield, embracing every part of who she is. He admits that he used to see her as just a character from a game, but now he truly wants to know her as his family. A small laugh escapes her lips, and he jokes that he probably should have scolded her instead. She takes his hand in hers, reminding him that she still has not given him her answer. In the doorway, Gray watches the scene unfold. He stands silently, a quiet observer of their developing bond. Violet gently places her hand, now adorned with the ring, over his. She tells him that while she may continue to cause him trouble, she wants him to be with her forever. She vows to be by his side and support him in turn, finally accepting his proposal. Steam rises from a natural hot spring, creating a serene atmosphere. Kuro relaxes in the warm water, commenting on how pleasant it is. The spring, which appeared recently near Shiki, reminds him of the hot springs from his past life, and he hopes to one day open it to the public. He wonders if Cyan will remember to bring him a change of clothes. A flashback to several minutes earlier shows Cyan leading him into the woods to investigate a supposed monster sighting. She had claimed there was a report of an unfamiliar monster, and given the recent Fenrir incident, he agreed they needed to investigate. She then accidentally slipped, sending them both tumbling down a muddy hill. They land in a heap at the bottom. She claims it was an accident, though she refuses to swear to God, and points out how dirty they both are. With theatrical flair, she points out the conveniently located hot spring nearby. She tells him to wash off while she fetches a change of clothes. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she tells him to wait like a good boy, even offering to strip his clothes off for him if he refuses. Now in the spring, Kuro wonders what Cyan is plotting, though he notes she was thoughtful enough to bring him a towel. He decides to relax and enjoy the rare moment of peace, regardless of her schemes. He hears a voice and sees a figure in the steam, assuming it's Gray. He realizes with a jolt that the voice does not belong to Gray. Violet steps into the water, explaining that she's here to fulfill their earlier promise to bathe together. An awkward silence falls as Kuro, flustered, comments on the water temperature. Realizing what has happened, Kuro internally curses Cyan for setting this up. Violet is also flustered by the unexpected situation. Kuro tries to regain his composure, his heart pounding in his chest. He thinks that if they can open the spring to the public, it would be a wonderful addition to the town. He notices his towel has been taken, and sees that someone has also made off with his clothes. He tries to calm himself down, reminding himself that as a pattern maker in his past life, he had plenty of experience with women. He tells himself he just needs to act naturally, as he has a certain immunity to these situations. His rationalizations crumble as the reality of the situation hits him, and his composure shatters. He tries to figure out what to do, his mind racing. He reminds himself that this is different. This woman is his wife. He wonders if she is just as nervous as he is. Violet is in a state of complete panic, her mind a jumble of flustered thoughts about what might happen next. Kuro suspects that she didn't come here on her own and that someone must have put her up to it. He's overwhelmed by her softness as she leans against him. He wonders if she's imitating Schwartz's confident demeanor. He realizes that Cyan must be behind this, and resolves to report her to the priest for her meddling. He asks Violet if he's done something wrong, which only confuses him further. She explains that she didn't do anything wrong. She confesses that she went to Cyan for advice on how to get closer to him. She wanted to deepen their relationship, and this was the result of that consultation. The raw vulnerability in her confession makes him see her in a new, overwhelmingly cute light. He is struck by an impulse he's never felt before. He feels an overwhelming desire to embrace her. Their moment is interrupted by the sudden arrival of Gray, who is surprised to find them both in the spring. Kuro is mortified, realizing Gray must have been sent here by Apricot's suggestion. Violet, seizing the opportunity, suggests they all bathe together as a family. She turns to Gray and points out a scar on his chest. Kuro explains that the scar was given to Gray by the previous lord. Violet is shocked to realize that Gray is a boy, not a girl as she had assumed. She apologizes profusely for the misunderstanding. A series of misunderstandings follow, but the atmosphere is light. Cyan arrives, pleased to see them all together in the bath. Gray is just happy that his new family seems to be getting along. The reveal of Gray's gender is quickly glossed over. They enjoy the hot spring together as a family, a precious, peaceful moment. After they get out, Kuro finds his clothes neatly folded with a note from Cyan apologizing for getting them dirty. Elsewhere, Cyan is frustrated that her plan for a romantic bath for two was interrupted, but is pleased that it seems to have worked out anyway. The peaceful moment is shattered when the priest runs up to Cyan, telling her to fetch the lord and his wife immediately, as the army is marching on Shiki. Violet and Kuro stand together, their expressions uncertain. The priest explains that due to the appearance of the Fenrir, the military will be conducting an investigation in the area to assess the increased monster activity. In this kingdom, the Knight Orders are considered the elite of the elite, positions that only nobles can attain. Kuro wonders why such elite knights would be sent to a remote place like Shiki for a mere investigation, but Cyan playfully feigns ignorance. Kuro is taken aback by Cyan's uncharacteristically demure behavior. Violet is equally surprised, questioning if this well-mannered woman is truly the same boisterous sister she knows. The priest, Snow White, tells Cyan she can relax as she must be tired from being so tense. It's explained that her prim and proper act is due to a mix of shyness, excitement, and nervousness in front of the priest she adores. The priest, however, accepts her usual boisterous personality as part of who she is, showing his own generous nature. With the arrival of the knights confirmed, Kuro begins planning for their accommodation and supplies, and Violet offers to help with the reception. Kuro asks if she is feeling all right. She expresses her concern about the arriving military personnel. Kuro reassures her, saying that even if she knows some of them, they are on duty and unlikely to cause a scene, especially since they would already know about the incident at the academy. He tells her he doesn't want to see her suffer and that she can stay in the mansion if things become too difficult, a sentiment she appreciates. She tells him that she also wants to cherish him and that they should work together to complete their duties for the sake of their future. They exchange promises to look after each other and not to overdo it. Violet tells him that he can rely on her as well and shouldn't try to handle everything on his own. They share a heartfelt look of mutual understanding and support. Their moment is interrupted by Cyan, who teasingly chastises them for being affectionate in public. Kaki suddenly appears, demanding to know if the female soldiers have arrived yet, complaining that the romantic spot he prepared will go to waste. Kuro tells him to go home and dismisses his suggestion to invite the local women instead. Apricot appears, dramatically lamenting the state of the corrupt Pale Rider Knight Order. She offers to use her newly created magic to patrol the area, which Gray curiously asks about. She proudly explains that her spell is, possibly, undetectable even by search magic. Kuro confirms with the others that the military contingent is running late. Ivory begins to panic, worrying that the soldiers might have run into trouble and gotten injured. He declares that he must rush to their aid, but Kuro holds him back. Orchid arrives, delivering an automatic lighting device that Kuro had requested after the Fenrir incident. She also provides him with a manual for the device. Violet admits that while she knows Orchid is a good person, she's still not used to her ominous appearance. The priest seems to sense something approaching. He remarks that the arrivals seem too young to be soldiers. Kuro recognizes their uniforms as those of the Azalea Academy. A group of students arrives, apologizing for their delay due to some minor trouble. The leader of the group looks at Violet in shock and demands to know why she is there. Violet recognizes them as students from the academy she attended just 2 months prior. The newcomers are people she would rather not have met. She recognizes them as Ash Austin, the prince's valet, and Chartreuse Calvin, the son of the Knight Commander, who had told her never to show her face again. She steels her resolve, reminding herself to remain calm and uphold the promise she made with Kuro to cooperate. The prince's words, telling her he could never love someone so selfish, echo in her mind. His harsh rejection resurfaces, making her question her own strength. Stepping forward, Kuro introduces himself as the Lord of the Land, Kuro Heartfield. He addresses the students, asking for the purpose of their visit to Shiki. One of the students recognizes him as the Lord they had been looking for, a man who has always protected them. The student representative, Ash Austin, formally announces that his group of 14 first-year students has arrived to investigate and subjugate monsters. Kuro questions why students are conducting the investigation instead of the military. Ash explains that the academy is having the students conduct the investigation in groups as a form of practical training and that their mixed-gender, mixed-status group was assigned to Shiki. Kuro acknowledges that he understands the situation. Violet notices a fleeting expression of irritation on Kuro's face. Chartreuse laughs mockingly at the mention of the name, Valentine. Apricot suddenly appears, dramatically welcoming the students and challenging those with the courage to witness her Rhapsody of Darkness and Crimson to step forward. Gray applauds her performance as she offers to pass judgment upon them. One of the students asks Kuro what she is saying, but Apricot chides him for not understanding her mana-infused words. She then grandly dismisses them as not worth her time and decides to leave the matter to the Lord. Kuro asks Violet and Cyan to look after the eccentric Apricot. He knows that if left unsupervised, there's no telling what she might do. Violet understands that this is his way of tactfully removing her from a potentially painful situation. Cyan accepts the task and leads Violet and the students away. Ash tries to stop them, but Cyan tells him to wait and directs the group to their lodgings. The priest offers the church as a place for them to stay. Ash asks Chartreuse if anyone has a problem with the arrangement, and he confirms they do not. With the accommodations settled, Gray leads the students away. Violet watches them go, her expression unreadable. Cyan reassures her, telling her that they are on her side. Violet thanks her, feeling pathetic for needing the support of others. She clenches her fist, frustrated that she had to rely on others despite her resolve to be strong. As the students are led away, Ash and Chartreuse look back at Kuro. Gray looks up at the heroine of the Otome game. He recognizes her as Violet-chan. She stands among the students, the protagonist of the story that has so deeply shaped their lives. A briefing concludes, outlining the primary facilities and natural conditions of the Shiki territory. Ash Austin thanks Baron Hartfield for the information. Kuro recalls that Ash is a main capture target in the game, Cassis, a calm and soft-spoken childhood friend of Prince Vermilion who can show a ruthless side for the prince's sake. He remembers how his own sister in his past life was a huge fan of Ash's character arc. Ash asks if there are any blacksmiths or weapon merchants in the area. Kuro confirms they have a blacksmith and will provide an introduction the next day, as Chartreuse Calvin, another capture target, looks on. Kuro remembers Chartreuse as the stoic and mentally fragile son of the Knight Commander, who wields a katana for some reason and endures immense pressure from his father. He's also known for having a sweet tooth, a character trait his sister had called transparently pandering. Ash formally addresses Kuro again. He apologizes for their group's late arrival, explaining they were delayed by a monster attack. He asks if there are any other local dangers or customs they should be aware of, but Kuro's mind drifts to the recent increase in monster attacks. He thinks for a moment. He begins to describe the local eccentricities, such as a creepy magician who sometimes appears from the shadows. He continues, mentioning a sister who climbs the church steeple with her bare hands. He finishes by warning them about a perverted doctor who gets excited by injuries, telling them not to worry as it's all part of the daily scenery. The students can only stare, asking if he's joking, to which he replies that he is not. With the briefing concluded, he tells them the priest will handle the rest. Ash stops him, asking an impertinent question. He asks about the woman who had left earlier with the nun and the girl who spoke strangely. He specifically asks about Violet Valentine. Kuro had expected this line of questioning. He asks what business they have with his wife. The students are shocked to learn that Violet is his wife, as Kuro internally asserts that they have no right to speak of her. Chartreuse mockingly comments that he must have his hands full, but Kuro calmly replies that she is a wonderful woman who is too good for him. Ash apologizes for his rudeness, explaining he was simply surprised as he had heard she had become a nun. Kuro understands their perspective. As far as they know, Violet is an enemy of the prince who was expelled from the academy, and their disdainful looks are grating on his nerves. A new arrival calls for Ash and Chartreuse, and they excuse themselves to answer the summons. Kuro watches them go, sensing that things are about to become much more complicated. A young woman approaches him, apologizing. Kuro is momentarily surprised by her appearance. He recognizes her as someone he's seen before. The girl shyly asks if he has a moment. She struggles to find her words, asking about Violet-chan. Kuro observes her friendly demeanor and appearance, a girl who looks like she needs to be protected. The girl asks if she could possibly meet with Violet. Kuro has a shocking realization. This girl is the protagonist of the Otome game, Casus. He recalls her backstory as a commoner girl skilled in the rare art of alchemy. In the game, she rises through the ranks of the academy, overcoming social barriers and winning the hearts of the capture targets. She is a seemingly ordinary girl who achieves extraordinary things, from defeating sealed dragons to protecting her loved ones and even forming a reverse harem. He remembers that the game allows the player to choose her name. He understands that this girl is, without a doubt, a bombshell for his and Violet's married life. The protagonist apologizes for eavesdropping and confirms that he and Violet are married. Kuro resolves that he cannot allow her to meet Violet right now. The protagonist explains that Violet had been very kind to her at the academy, and she wants to thank her and apologize for her sudden disappearance. A voice calls out, identifying the protagonist as Nephrite. It's Chartreuse, who interrupts their conversation to ask for her help with some damaged luggage, requesting she use her alchemy to repair it. Nephrite cheerfully agrees, happy for the rare opportunity to be useful. Ash thanks her, telling her not to be so modest as she is already accomplished. She apologizes to Kuro and says she'll speak with him later. She introduces herself as Cream-Hilled Nephrite before being led away by the two capture targets. Kuro watches them go, realizing he missed his chance to refuse her request. He anticipates that this will become a problem, as he is now being watched with suspicion by Ash. He deduces that Ash and Chartreuse, who are in love with the protagonist, likely see him as an obstacle for trying to keep her away from Violet's husband. He sighs, realizing he has a lot to do, from assisting the students' investigation to introducing them to the blacksmith. But his top priority is Violet's mental well-being. He cannot leave her to face this alone. He resolves to protect her, even if it means making enemies of the academy and the kingdom. He steels himself, knowing what he must do now to achieve that goal. A shot of the mansion establishes the scene. Apricot dramatically declares that her eyes are, in fact, evil eyes. Gray and Cyan react with shock. Cyan says that as a purifier of evil, it is her duty to cleanse Apricot's demonic power. Violet has started to understand Apricot's way of speaking, realizing she simply thinks cursed powers are cool and isn't actually afflicted. Cyan decides to test this theory by casting her most powerful purification spell, Sanctuary. Gray cries out in alarm as Apricot begins to sparkle and glow. Cyan is shocked, as the spell should only affect the undead or demons, but Violet explains that Apricot is simply channeling demonic energy from a tool given to her by Orchid. Apricot continues to sparkle brightly. Violet wonders what she's even doing, getting caught up in the residents' antics. She knows they are just trying to be considerate and cheer her up in their own strange way. She thinks of Kuro and how he, too, was trying to be considerate of her feelings. Kuro returns to the mansion and is greeted warmly by Violet, as well as an overly enthusiastic Cyan. Violet worries that something happened with the students from the academy. Kuro pulls out a large bottle of brandy. He smiles and asks if they'd all like a drink. At Kuro's sudden suggestion, a party begins. Cyan cheers enthusiastically, already drinking. The lively banquet is underway. Violet observes that Cyan is the first to get drunk and is now aggressively pestering others to drink with her. Kaki playfully offers the perverted nun another drink, which she happily accepts. He then forces the drink on Violet. Ivory intervenes, taking the bottle and drinking it himself, noting that the 96 proof alcohol is surprisingly good. Gray, holding a glass of non-alcoholic champagne, timidly says that he'd like to try some real alcohol. Apricot immediately scolds her disciple, telling him that alcohol is for adults and is against the law for minors. She tells him he should want to grow tall and healthy, and that wanting to act grown-up is proof that he is still a child. She then offers him a special lemon and honey soda she made, which he finds delicious. While the adults drink, Apricot announces that she will demonstrate her cooking skills for her apprentice. Cyan happily asks if she's making snacks. In a flash, Apricot presents the finished dish. Cyan praises the food's deliciousness, and Gray proudly notes that Apricot is the best cook among them. Violet, however, is torn, feeling that she should be focusing on more serious matters, even as she enjoys the lively party and delicious food. She calls out to a happily drunk Kuro. She wonders if she can truly understand his intentions in this state, suspecting he's just trying to be considerate of her feelings. Kuro tells her that the past cannot be changed. He says that it's okay to forget everything once in a while and just enjoy the moment, just as the others are doing. He tells her that while running away can be shameful, it can also be useful and that she doesn't have to bear her burdens alone because she has allies here. The word allies resonates with Violet as she looks at the happy faces around her. He jokes that the proverb he quoted also means it's okay to flee from your current environment. A genuine smile breaks through Violet's resolve, and she decides to accept his kindness and enjoy the party, declaring that she doesn't care about her father or the past at this moment. Kuro is pleased to see her enjoying herself, and they continue to drink together. The robot, Blonde, makes a sudden entrance. He thanks them for the invitation in a robotic voice. Ivory immediately offers the robot a drink, which it accepts. The absurdity of the situation is not lost on Violet. She wonders aloud how a robot can possibly drink, as the harmonious party continues late into the night. The next day, Violet thanks Cyan, telling her that she now believes the people of Shiki are her allies. She then declares that she can't face Ash and the others yet and requests a different task to keep her away from them. Kuro decides to fulfill his promise to introduce Chartreuse to the blacksmith. He brings Nephrite along, knowing that Violet would be shaken if she saw her. As they arrive at the smithy, Nephrite recognizes the name of the blacksmith, Brian, as a living legend who vanished from the Empire. Nephrite asks Chartreuse if Brian is famous, and he confirms it. Nephrite expresses her own interest in his work, which makes Chartreuse blush slightly. Kuro reflects on Brian's reputation as Shiki's only blacksmith, a difficult but respected master craftsman who would refuse a commission even from the king if he didn't like it. But he knows the crucial detail of why such a legendary figure is in this remote town. He decides it's time to meet him and asks Gray to wait outside. He knocks on the door and calls for Brian. A gruff voice tells Kurobu to enter. Chartreuse requests a new weapon, saying he has the money. Brian, the blacksmith, immediately tells them to leave. Chartreuse pleads with him, explaining that he must become stronger and needs a weapon worthy of that goal. Brian scoffs, saying a good swordsman doesn't need to choose his weapon, but Nephrite jumps in, asking him to help as well. She explains that Chartreuse's sword was damaged while protecting them, but Brian retorts that it's none of his concern. He dismisses Chartreuse as a weak-willed brat and tells him to go home. Kuro recognizes that Brian is stubbornly refusing to budge. He decides to intervene, knowing that he can leverage the situation to put Chartreuse in his debt and make him less likely to bother Violet. With a dramatic flourish, he declares that he will strip. Nephrite, misunderstanding completely, declares that she will strip too, much to Chartreuse's horror. Ash holds them back, telling them both to calm down. Chartreuse, dropping his formal tone, declares he will strip to prove he is not weak, and Kuro tells Nephrite that her stripping would only embarrass Chartreuse more. Chartreuse is horrified at the thought of Nephrite disrobing. Kuro notes with exasperation that she was prepared to strip down to nothing. Brian finally speaks up, telling them he's not interested in their naked bodies and that if they want his recognition, they should hunt a B-rank monster alone. Chartreuse refuses to back down, declaring he will stay here until Brian acknowledges him. Nephrite worries about what he'll do about school, but he says he'll submit a leave of absence, as this is something he cannot back down from. Kuro realizes that instead of putting Chartreuse in his debt, he's just created a situation where the hot-headed student will be staying in Shiki indefinitely, which will only increase Violet's stress. Resigned to his failure, he sighs that he has no choice. He steps back into the smithy, telling Brian that a lord's request is not something to be ignored so easily. He acknowledges Brian's stubbornness and pride but says he has his own methods. He knows that Brian is the type of person who will not work for someone he doesn't respect, not even a king, so he proposes a condition. He tells the blacksmith that the condition will be to his benefit. Kuro claps his hands together once. Gray enters the workshop. Brian asks if he's been called. He immediately recognizes the boy, exclaiming, "My sweet angel, Gray-kun." The blacksmith, Bry, stares with a look of pure adoration at the young man who has just entered his workshop. Chartreuse and Nephrite look on, completely baffled by the blacksmith's sudden and dramatic change in demeanor. Bry fawns over the newcomer, Gray, who calmly wishes him a good morning and asks why he was summoned. The blacksmith worriedly asks if Gray overheard their argument, but Gray explains that he was waiting outside as Kuro's attendant and heard nothing. When Gray asks if there is a problem, Bry quickly and nervously laughs, insisting that everything is fine. Kuro watches the exchange and internally apologizes to Gray for using him to manipulate the blacksmith. He explains to Gray that their original plan was to conduct an investigation at Azalea Academy with the students. Kuro then fabricates a story, telling Gray that Bry actually needs help to finish crafting the weapon, which visibly shocks the blacksmith. Gray correctly interprets this as a request for him to assist Bry instead of participating in the investigation, and Kuro confirms, asking if he is willing. Bry flusteredly agrees to the arrangement but lays down a strict condition: Gray will only help with Chartreuse's weapon and nothing else. Kuro notes that Bry's artisan spirit has been successfully ignited by the challenge. Gray formally accepts the task, though he seems perplexed that he would be of any use in a forge. Bry boasts that with Gray present, the quality of his weapons will be twice as good, a claim that confuses Gray, but he accepts it. Overjoyed by Gray's agreement, Bry celebrates enthusiastically as Gray promises to do his best to help. When Chartreuse privately questions if this is a good idea, Kuro reassures him that Bry will not cut corners on the job, especially since he'll want to show off for Gray. Kuro then explains the true nature of Bry's difficult personality, hinting that it's not what it seems. He reveals that Bry was exiled from the Empire simply because his intense adoration for young boys went too far. He is a harmless admirer, content to watch them from a distance. Nephrite remarks on how very eccentric the legendary blacksmith is, and Kuro can only agree with a weary sigh. With time to spare before their investigation, Nephrite asks to see more of Bry's work, and he permits her to look around. She is immediately impressed, recognizing the superior quality of the blades at a single glance and expressing her fascination to a curious Chartreuse. Chartreuse correctly deduces that her interest stems from her own craft as an alchemist, and she confirms that, as a creator, she is deeply interested in such a masterwork of technique. Nephrite then asks Chartreuse to stop addressing her so formally, leading to a comedic exchange where he misunderstands how to speak to her more casually. Kuro watches them interact with a small, amused smile. Chartreuse abruptly turns to Kuro, announcing that he has something he needs to say. Sensing an unpleasant conversation is about to begin, Kuro follows him as he gestures them out of the workshop. The two of them stand alone outside the forge. Chartreuse formally addresses Kuro by his title of Baron. He begins by stating that, based on Kuro's helpful actions, he wants to believe that Kuro is a good person. However, he pointedly clarifies that wanting to believe something is not the same as actually believing it. And it is for that very reason that he cannot forgive the fact that Kuro is bound to that woman. He delivers a stern warning to Kuro: do not open his heart to Violet Valentine. Kuro's expression becomes one of extreme boredom. Chartreuse presses on, insisting that Violet will bring Kuro nothing but destruction. Kuro's expression hardens into a menacing smile as he realizes Chartreuse is deliberately trying to start a fight. Unaware, Chartreuse continues his tirade, calling Violet a cancer that has taken root within the prince. He claims that while Kuro may know some of the circumstances, he cannot know the full details, or else he would never view her in a positive light. When Kuro asks for his reasoning, Chartreuse begins listing Violet's supposed terrible deeds at the academy. Kuro remains completely unfazed by the accusations, as he is already aware of everything Chartreuse is saying thanks to the memories of his past life. He internally acknowledges that Chartreuse's primary motivation for his hatred is likely the belief that Violet wronged Nephrite, the girl he admires. In response to the accusations, Kuro calmly repeats his statement from the previous day, that he is fond of Violet, prompting Chartreuse to ask if he's being serious. Chartreuse becomes enraged, demanding to know how Kuro can possibly accept her after learning of her past. Kuro simply smiles and replies that his own past is not particularly clean, so he is more concerned about whether she can accept him. He tells Chartreuse he has no right to judge him, but then adds with mock sympathy that he'll pity him when the idiots of Shiki become too much for him to handle. Chartreuse presses further, demanding to know the reason why Kuro feels any affection for that woman. Kuro reflects on the question, admitting that their marriage was arranged and that at first, he didn't try to see her for who she truly was. His mind flashes back to a memory of Violet at her lowest point, crying in despair and utterly lost. He looks back at the memory in his mind. He recalls that seeing her vulnerable expression made him feel that he couldn't leave her alone, and for him, that was reason enough to fall for her, though he tells Chartreuse he has no intention of explaining it. He concludes the conversation by stating that he is not mature enough to waste time explaining his wife's virtues to someone who is determined to hate her. As he turns to walk away, a voice calls out to them. Nephrite appears, exclaiming that she was worried because they both disappeared so suddenly. She asks if anything happened, but Kuro smoothly deflects the question, assuring her that everything is fine. Eager to change the subject, he suggests they head back to the church, but Nephrite remembers her earlier request and asks once more if it's possible to meet Violet. Kuro inwardly panics, having forgotten her request. He knows that a meeting between the game's heroine and its villainess would be a disaster, especially with her two protectors in tow. He attempts to put her off by claiming Violet is too busy with her official duties to meet with anyone. Nephrite persists, asking if there might be any small window of opportunity to see her, even for a moment. Thinking fast, Kuro concocts an outlandish excuse, stating that Violet is scheduled for aerial patrol duty and will be flying for the rest of the day. Nephrite is understandably confused, pointing out that flying is impossible without an airship or a trained monster. Just then, the giant suit of armor from the party lands behind them with a heavy thud. The robot cheerfully wishes everyone a good morning and comments on the fine weather. Seizing the opportunity, Kuro introduces the robot and doubles down on his lie, explaining that Violet needs to ride it to get accustomed to flying. He quietly whispers to the robot, telling it to play along with his story. The robot, understanding its cue, formally greets the strangers and offers them a small cake as a friendly gesture. Faced with this bizarre turn of events, Nephrite can only laugh nervously and remark on what a wide and strange world it is. Meanwhile, Violet, having finished her administrative work early, decides to spend some time gardening. While she is outside, a bright flash in the sky catches her attention, followed by a loud crashing sound. She turns just in time to see the robot crash land directly in front of her. The robot gives her a confident thumbs up from its position in the crater. It then extends a hand and, in its robotic voice, invites her to come fly with it. Violet can only stare, utterly speechless and confused by the sudden invitation. In the central plaza, the first day of the Azalea Academy students' investigation begins. Ash addresses the gathered students, announcing that they will proceed with the groups and members that were decided on beforehand. He adds that for safety, members of the Shiki community will accompany each investigation group, and Kuro notes that he has been assigned to the team with Ash and Nephrite. Kuro reflects on his companion's abilities, acknowledging that Ash is an expert in earth and wind magic and that both he and Nephrite are formidable in combat. He sighs in envy, wishing he possessed even a tenth of their magical talent while lamenting his own weakness in that area. Just then, Nephrite announces the arrival of the Shiki members who will be joining them. A man with long, wild hair greets the kittens from the academy with a flourish and inappropriately invites them to his room to conduct their investigation. He is immediately countered by a woman who casts a water creation spell, explaining that altering the environment is a good way to immobilize suspicious individuals. Another of the Shiki members then uses creation magic to conjure a long strip of cloth. The cloth wraps itself around the flamboyant man's head, blindfolding and disorienting him. With the target confused, the third member moves in to finish the takedown. He delivers a single, decisive blow to the man's stomach, knocking him unconscious. As the students watch in shock, Kuro calmly drags the unconscious man away from the crowd. He uses the incident as a teaching moment, instructing the students to call for help if they encounter such suspicious people and to never try and handle things alone. When a student asks what will become of the man, Kuro assures them that his designated caretaker will retrieve him later and that the man is quite tough. Another student asks if this caretaker is a family member, but the female magic user clarifies that they are not related at all. She explains that the man is technically a margrave and his caretaker is more of a guard, before finally declaring the official start of the investigation. Kuro's group moves on to their first survey location, an outdoor clearing. He explains that it is the site of a recently discovered hot spring, though he cautions them that the area is not yet fully developed, a fact that intrigues Nephrite. Suddenly, Nephrite cries out in alarm and points toward the spring. She yells that there is a man drowning in the hot spring's water. The group rushes to the water's edge to help. They find a dark-skinned, white-haired man seemingly passed out in the water, still clutching his sword. Kuro wades in and lifts the man out with surprising ease, noting how light he is. He calmly reassures a concerned Nephrite that the man is not drowning but is simply fast asleep. Nephrite expresses her surprise that he is sleeping fully clothed in the water, and Kuro explains that this particular individual has a habit of sleeping anywhere and everywhere. Kuro tries to wake the man, whom he calls Brown, telling him that he'll catch a cold if he stays in his wet clothes. As Brown continues to sleep peacefully, Nephrite remarks that he looks as cute as a small child, while Ash dryly comments on his nerve. Ash observes that the man appears to be an adult and should therefore exhibit more self-control, which causes Kuro to wonder if Ash is feeling jealous. Deciding to act as a mediator, Kuro asks Ash to forgive Brown's strange behavior. He then reveals the surprising truth. Although Brown has the body of a grown man, he is actually only 7 years old. Both Ash and Nephrite are completely stunned by the revelation that the man is, in fact, a young child. Back at the forge, the blacksmith Bry is shown having a severe internal crisis, struggling to decide if the adult-looking 7-year-old Brown qualifies as a Shota. The scene then shifts its focus away from the investigation group. Elsewhere, Violet is seen soaring high above the ground. She looks down at the distant landscape in awe, marveling at the fact that she is literally flying through the open sky. The experience is terrifying, and she pleads with the robot carrying her to slow down, but it informs her that it is impossible. It clarifies that they are already flying at the slowest possible speed as they continue to streak across the sky. She recalls the robot's earlier explanation that its ancient technology creates a protective field around them, meaning she cannot fall, but this knowledge does little to calm her fears. The robot playfully teases her, suggesting that Kuro would surely become jealous if he could see them now. Violet reflects on how the robot suddenly appeared and insisted they go flying because she had never experienced it before. She realizes that the entire flight was a ruse orchestrated by Kuro to get her away from the area before Nephrite could ask to meet her, and she feels a familiar sense of being protected by him once again. Suddenly, the robot's head twitches as if receiving a signal. It apologizes to Violet, announcing an emergency summons and stating that they must proceed directly to their new destination without delay. The robot tries to reassure a panicked Violet by telling her they will arrive by noon, winking as it does so. Violet shouts that the arrival time is not the issue and demands to know why the robot, which had been speaking in a broken, robotic way, can now speak perfectly clearly. The robot responds with a philosophical deflection about the nature of normalcy, leaving Violet even more frustrated. They eventually land on a bridge on the outskirts of a town neighboring Shiki. Utterly exhausted from the high-speed flight and confused about the supposed emergency, Violet decides to stop thinking and simply enjoy the peace and quiet. She stretches languidly, realizing that being away from the town's hustle and bustle means she is free from the judgment and scrutiny of others, a simple act of freedom she couldn't have imagined a few months prior. Kuro's words echo in her mind, reminding her that she no longer has to fight her battles alone. Although she is still afraid of facing Ash and Chartreuse, she is beginning to truly cherish her new allies, a thought that prompts the robot to ask if she is okay. She clarifies that she isn't feeling ill from the flight, but that her mood soured because she was dwelling on the past. The robot gently tells her that she is not a lost cause. In an attempt to lift her spirits, the robot tilts its head and invites her to have lunch with it. Violet realizes that it is indeed lunchtime, and the robot playfully remarks that its invitation sounded like it was asking her out on a date. The word, date, causes Violet to blush and become completely flustered. She stammers that as Kuro's wife she couldn't possibly accept, but the robot clarifies it simply meant they should eat their packed lunches together, observing her charming lack of immunity to teasing. After taking a bite of the food the robot offers, she exclaims that it is delicious. She briefly wonders where the robot is producing the food from but decides it's a mystery she is better off not solving. She notes that Shiki seems to have an abundance of skilled cooks, listing Kuro, Gray, and Apricot, and wonders if this high standard is normal there. By contrast, she feels her own cooking, while improving, is still far from what she would call delicious, even though Kuro and Gray always eat it without complaint. She remembers her former self, who scorned cooking as a task beneath nobles and was cruel to the heroine for making lunch for the prince and his friends. She now finds joy in the very thing she used to condemn, which she feels is incredibly selfish of her, prompting the robot to again muse on the meaning of normal. The robot then turns its head toward her and asks a very direct question. It asks her simply, "Do you like Kuro-kun?" Startled and flustered by the sudden, personal question, Violet admits that, when asked so directly, the answer is of course yes. She reflects that he has treated her with kindness and respect, making her feel cherished, and she wants to become a source of strength for him, though she is still uncertain if what she feels is romantic love. She looks at the robot, asking why it would suddenly ask her such a thing. A startling thought suddenly occurs to her. With wide eyes, she asks if the robot itself has feelings for Kuro. The final page is an unrelated illustration of a character resembling Apricot dressed as a witch on a broomstick. Violet stares at the robot in shock, suspecting that it might have romantic feelings for her husband, Kuro. She quickly raises a hand to object, stating that as Kuro's wife, she cannot condone an affair, but the robot flatly denies that this is the case, much to her relief. It explains that since she was asked about her feelings for Kuro, it must also answer with sincerity. Violet confesses that while she believes she does love Kuro, she also feels like an unchaste and undeserving woman, and asks the robot why she would think of herself in such a negative way. She reveals that she once had someone else she loved deeply, Prince Vermilion. From a young age, she had adored the prince, and with a promise of marriage between them, she had dedicated her entire life to becoming a woman worthy of standing by his side. However, upon entering the academy, he began to dote on another woman, and Violet, consumed by insecurity, jealously tried to impose her own ideals upon him. Blinded by her emotions, she challenged him to a duel and was defeated, leaving her with only the scornful glares of her peers as the prince coldly declared that he had never once loved her. She concludes her story by calling herself a truly pathetic and promiscuous woman, but the robot remains silent, asking again why she feels this way. Violet explains that holding on to her feelings for a past love while being married to Kuro is the very definition of being unchaste. The robot, suddenly speaking with perfect fluency, chides her for being too rigid and hard on herself. It gently takes her hand in its own, telling her that there is one important thing it can say to her. It advises her to be more flexible in her thinking, before abruptly announcing that it is initiating flight preparations. For the second time in a single day, Violet finds herself being carried screaming through the air against her will. As they fly, she spots something approaching them and points it out to the robot, a B-rank monster known as a wyvern. The robot scoffs at the lowly B-rank creature and nonchalantly fires a massive energy beam from its cannon, obliterating the monster instantly. With a nuisance dispatched, the robot calmly directs Violet's attention to the view around them. It gestures to the sky, asking her if it isn't beautiful. She looks out at the endless blue expanse and finds herself agreeing with the robot. As they soar through the sky, she has the surreal feeling that they are the only two beings in the entire world. From their great height, the academy and the kingdom that were once her whole world now look incredibly small, and the robot tells her that everyone's definition of normal is different. It reminds her of Kuro's wish to love all of her, including her past, just as she is. Violet realizes that this is the source of her hesitation. She has been questioning whether she is truly worthy of his kindness. The robot suddenly shouts at her to be quiet, its voice sharp and clear. Violet is completely taken aback by the unexpected outburst. The robot scolds her for overthinking and for trying to give up on love, telling her not to use her past as an excuse to run away from her feelings. When she dismisses its words as just pretty talk, the robot retorts, "So what?" and accelerates, telling her to hold on tight. It tells her that since Kuro has already expressed his desire to love her, her only responsibility is to respond to those feelings. A new resolve fills her as she decides to selfishly pursue her own happiness with Kuro. She declares that her past is now behind her and that those who cast her aside will be the ones to feel regret. With a determined expression, she thanks the robot for its blunt, unsolicited advice. She realizes that by bottling up her feelings, she was only making herself look foolish. Letting out all her pent-up frustration, she screams into the open sky, calling Prince Vermilion a giant idiot. She is surprised by the volume of her own voice, having never shouted like that before. She continues to vent, yelling that she has every right to feel jealous of the other woman. After all, that woman must have possessed a charm powerful enough to captivate even the prince. Violet vows to become an amazing woman and show them all how happy she can be with her new life. She repeats her vow, her voice filled with newfound determination and strength. She shouts that they will regret ever letting her go, for she is now Kuro's loving wife and will never belong to them. Furthermore, she declares that she now has a wonderful husband, caring allies, and even a son. She remembers the vow she made on her wedding ring to stay by Kuro's side and reaffirms her commitment to find happiness with him. She looks forward to the day she can see the astonished faces of the prince and his new love when they witness her happiness. However, a single tear escapes her eye as she reflects on her past. She admits to herself that her love for the prince was genuine, and that it brought her joy and gave her the strength to improve herself. She will not deny the truth of those feelings. Striving to be better for his sake was what kept her going for so long. But now she is Kuro's wife, and though they have known each other for only a few months, a short time to decide on a life partner, she knows things are different. With tears in her eyes, she declares that she will embrace everything, her past, her present, and her future, as Violet Heartfield, and she will find happiness with her new family. After her cathartic outburst, a profound sense of peace and relief washes over her. She acknowledges that she still has much to consider, such as whether she can build a wonderful family with Kuro and Gray, and her lingering desire to punch the prince, but she is ready to face it all. She stands tall, her hesitation gone, and declares that she will no longer waver. Feeling refreshed and determined, she thanks the robot and vows to do her best, telling Kuro to wait for her return. Unseen in the forest below, a shadowy figure watches them fly away, confirming that he was not mistaken in identifying Violet. Back at the mansion, Kuro is quietly reading a book in the library. He recalls the day's events. After finding Brown in the hot spring, they escorted him home before collecting Chartreuse's newly forged weapon from Bry. The student's investigation has been cancelled due to rain, but Violet bursts into the library, cheerfully declaring it a beautiful day, while Kuro muses that rainy days make him want to read different genres. Gray quietly approaches Kuro and informs him that Violet is acting strangely. When Gray asks Violet where she is going, she cheerfully declines his offer of an umbrella, saying this is a Nursuk opportunity. Kuro is completely lost, while Gray, though equally confused, insists that whatever she is thinking is wrong. Violet then begins to unbutton her dress, complaining about how hot it is. When she shivers from the cold, Kuro rushes to her side, scolding her for being reckless and draping his stole over her shoulders to keep her warm. She thanks him and begins to smell the stole, prompting him to tell her to stop, but she only finds his reaction odd. Kuro looks at her, his bewilderment growing. He finally asks her why she is wearing her old academy uniform, and she explains that seeing the students made her feel nostalgic. When Kuro points out that her skirt is far too short, she says she heard that 40 centimeters above the knee was fashionable, but she was too embarrassed to go that high, to which he bluntly replies that such a length is simply perverted. Kuro grows flustered, demanding to know where she heard such scandalous information. He realizes with a sinking feeling that something is very wrong with Violet's behavior. Gray agrees, adding that Violet has a history of jumping to intense and misguided conclusions. He brings up the time she mistook him for a girl, a memory that makes Kuro cringe. Gray speculates that at 15, she might be going through a rebellious adolescent phase, something beyond their understanding as men. Kuro attempts to dismiss the issue, assuming she would consult with another woman about such things, but this proves to be the wrong thing to say. Both Gray and their young disciple suddenly lunge at Kuro, insisting he must take off his coat to help warm up Mother Violet. Kuro throws up his hands, desperately trying to get the two of them to calm down. He protests in vain as a night of utter chaos is about to begin.